Chapter 1155. The sky slowly brightened. More and more Ming soldiers began to gather at the foot of the Jianghu left guard city. Countless scaling ladders were carried into the army. War drums beat and shouts shook the sky. Above the city gate tower, Bai Shuang narrowed his eyes and looked at everything below the city. He could see that the Ming army's discipline seemed to be much stricter and the morale of the soldiers seemed to have improved a lot. Although he did not know what caused it, he still cautiously said to the soldiers beside him, "Inform everyone that the enemy's attack today will be very fierce. Tell everyone to be in their best condition." Ming soldiers had eaten their fill last night. Even this morning there was still shredded meat in the soup. They had never enjoyed such treatment before and were ready to do their best. Chen Dula did not sleep much last night, so his eyes were still a little red. However, he had to force himself to stay alert. The Jianghu left guard was his territory. If he could not get it back, it would be a great sin. Even if it was for his own life, he had to fight with all his might. Li Tong, who noticed this scene, looked at Chen Dula's appearance and laughed. "Don't worry. We have so many soldiers. It's only a matter of time before we take down the Jianghu left guard. This will still be your territory." It was no wonder that Li Tong was so happy. Once they took down this place, he would have made a great contribution. Not only would he have taken back the city, but he would also have defeated the five-star army. When he reported this to the imperial court, he would have made a great contribution. He would also be the first general to defeat the five-star army on the battlefield. Just thinking about it made him feel good. Yes, General Li is right. We must take down the Jianghu left guard. Chen Dula said with a hint of ruthlessness in his voice. Both generals made up their minds and the general attack began. In order to achieve the goal of taking down the Jianghu left guard in one battle, they sent out 4 echelons in the first battle, a total of 20,000 soldiers to attack the city. They launched a wave of attacks from the east, south, west and north. There were only 8,000 soldiers guarding the city, and they were divided into 4 towers. There were only 2,000 soldiers on each tower, and the weakness of the lack of military strength was quickly revealed. After only half an hour of fighting, some Ming soldiers had already rushed up the city walls. Although they were quickly suppressed, the situation was still very dangerous. "Commander, let's switch from cavalry to infantry and reinforce the tower." Tong Long could tell that the situation was not good, so he anxiously suggested to White Shuang. "No, let the cavalry prepare to leave the city for battle." Bai Shuang shook his head. He knew very well that the 2,000 men he brought with him and the 2,500 men under Tong Long's command were all cavalrymen. Asking them to dismount and fight was tantamount to giving up their greatest advantage. It was not worth it. Furthermore, he didn't think that these 4,500 people would be able to turn the tide of the battle. They would only be able to hold on for a little longer. Looking into the distance, Bai Shuang's expression remained calm. However, in his heart he said anxiously, "Master, why aren't you here yet? Could it be that the Jianghu left guard was going to give up just like that?" The siege was still ongoing. As if he could see that victory was already decided, Li Tong sent out another 20,000 soldiers, divided into 4 echelons, and continued to increase the number of soldiers, causing the Jianghu left guard's defense to become shaky. When Chen Dula saw that the city was about to fall, the trace of worry in his heart finally disappeared. He laughed and said, "General Li is amazing. If this continues, the city will definitely fall today. When the five-star army's reinforcements arrive, we can only leave regretfully." I hope that the five-star army's reinforcements will arrive. I have arranged a feast for 30,000 soldiers at the back of the army. Li Tong arrogantly snorted and then laughed. "I'm just afraid that some people won't dare to come. Otherwise, I'll let them see how powerful we are." "General Li is wise," Chen Dula said flatteringly. There were indeed 30,000 Ming soldiers at the back of the army. They had a large number of horse barricades, but because they were well hidden, they couldn't be seen from afar. Among them there were also many archers and spearmen. They were specifically used to deal with the five-star army's cavalry. As soon as they appeared, they would use bows and arrows to attack from afar. When they got closer, the spearmen would attack. After inflicting heavy damage, they would carry out a large number of horse barricades. At that time, the five-star army's cavalry would be unable to return. This set of tactics was indeed suitable to deal with cavalry. If they weren't prepared, even if the 1st Cavalry Division arrived, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. They might even be heavily injured. However, Li Tong neglected one point. He forgot about Yang Chendong. Against this kind of formation, the cavalry would naturally suffer heavy losses. However, if it was changed to a flintlock attack, it would be completely different. In front of the cold front that could shoot further and aim more accurately, the archers and spearmen were just sending themselves to their deaths. Originally, they had already spread out a large net and were just waiting for the 5-star Army's cavalry to appear. However, because of Yang Qindong's appearance and the 4th Lu Division's attack, the situation had changed greatly. The victory had been turned into a defeat. Of course, Li Tong didn't know all of this. If he knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 4th Lu Division would appear here, he wouldn't be so confident. He would have retreated to a nearby city to hide. Many times, war was also about information. The side with more accurate information would have the upper hand and be able to obtain the final victory. Yang Qindong brought the army over. In order to conserve the soldiers' stamina, they didn't rush over very quickly. When they saw the 30,000 Baiming army blocking their path, 4 hours had already passed since Li Tong gave the order to attack the city. Teacher, it seems like the Jianghu left guard is in danger. I don't know if Commander Bai Shuang can hold them off. Why don't I lead the cavalry to charge first? Sensing the intensity of the battle ahead, Division Commander Jianghu volunteered. Don't be in a hurry. You have to believe in Bai Shuang. He isn't someone who will just sit there and wait for death. Since there aren't any cavalry charging out of the city gates, it shouldn't be the end yet. What we need to do now is to deal a heavy blow to the Baiming army in front of us. Only then will we be able to completely turn the situation around. Yang Qindong's eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. He could immediately tell that the 30,000 Baiming army in front of them were here to block their path. Tianhu naturally didn't dare to question Yang Qindong's orders. He looked at the 30,000 Baiming army in front of him and said with pride, It's only 30,000 Baiming infantry. Although there are a lot of them, they are nothing in front of the 1st Cavalry Division. Teacher, please wait a moment. Let's see how I break through them. As he spoke, Tianhu was about to order the brothers of the 1st Cavalry Division to attack. After all, winning a battle with a small number of people was a common occurrence in their eyes. No. Yang Qindong grabbed Tianhu, who was about to leave, and said with bright eyes, Can't you see that the enemy is full of archers and spearmen? They are all used against cavalry. Also, they are standing so close together. It's obvious that they are hiding something. They might even have something that is used against cavalry. It's not wise to rush out now. After Yang Qindong's analysis, Tianhu didn't act rashly. It wasn't that he hadn't encountered a formation that was used against cavalry before. However, with the bravery of the soldiers and the tip of the arrows, there was nothing that couldn't be broken through. As for the archers' attacks, they were nothing in front of the 1st Cavalry Division, who had a blade and a shield. It was the same for the spearmen. As long as they charged forward fiercely enough, they could completely crush their opponents. Then it would be time for the autumn wind to sweep away the fallen leaves. However, if the enemy was still hiding some trump cards, then it would be bad. After all, the 1st Cavalry Division's biggest weakness was that they were too few in number. They only had 8,000 men now. Even if they lost 3-1, they couldn't afford to lose so many men. Teacher, there's no hurry. Let the 4th Master Lu take action. They have been holding back for a long time. Moreover, the formation in front of them doesn't have the slightest bit of obstruction. Yang Qindong saw Tianhu's hesitation and chuckled. Then he turned to the 4th Master Lu's Ling Daqiang and said, Master Ling, is there any problem with leaving the first battle to you? Other than the 4th Master Lu, the rest were all cavalry. Ling Daqiang originally thought that he wouldn't have anything to do in this battle and was prepared to capture captives. But now that the first battle was going to be handed over to him, how could he possibly decline? Thus he immediately agreed with a face full of joy. 6th young master, just wait and see. An opponent like this who doesn't even have the slightest bit of resistance is exactly like a meal on a plate for us, 4th Master Lu. The spearmen were afraid that the enemy would hide. If there were any obstructions, then it would be depressing. But now the enemy was on the open ground. They were no different from live targets. As for the archers and spearmen, how could any of them reach them? Good, then quickly go and prepare. Yang Qindong was also worried that Bai Shuang wouldn't be able to defend the city and would rush out first. If that was the case, then once the Baiming army entered the Jian province left guard, it would take a lot more time and effort to capture him. This wasn't something that he wanted to see. After Ling Daqiang agreed, he went to prepare. The 4th Master Lu was originally part of the Cold Vanguard formation. It was an absolute elite force. After the order was given, the 4 regiments under it spread out and began to charge towards the 30,000 Baiming army blocking the way. The 30,000 Baiming army was currently gathered together out of boredom. The mission that Li Tong gave them was to stop any cavalry from the 5-star army that wanted to reinforce the Jian province left guard. However, seeing that their attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer, and that the city was about to be taken, there was still no sign of any reinforcements. Many of them began to slack off, thinking that no more enemies would appear. Chapter 1156. When the 4th Lu Division suddenly appeared in the distance and turned from a small black dot to a large black dot, it also attracted the attention of the soldiers. Some of the Kiliarchs and Centurions also shouted loudly, ordering their soldiers to prepare for battle. That's not right, they aren't cavalry? Some of the sharp-eyed soldiers saw that the enemy wasn't cavalry as General Li Tong expected. That's right, they aren't cavalry. What's going on? As the distance between the two sides decreased, more and more soldiers voiced out their doubts. Who cares what kind of soldiers they are? If cavalry can't charge over, infantry won't be able to either. Everyone prepare yourselves. Especially the archers, wait for orders to fire. Although the Ming general in charge of leading the troops was also curious, he still pretended to be calm due to his duty. As he gave his orders, he also arranged for a soldier to report everything that happened to General Li Tong. In order to reach the goal of quickly engaging the enemy, the soldiers of the 4th Lu Division rode their bicycles and rushed to the battlefield. Only when the distance between the two sides was 3 li did they stop their bicycles and change to running. Then they rushed towards the Ming army. They're here. They're so fast. Everyone prepare for battle. Seeing the speed of the army, the Ming general in charge of leading the troops had a trace of panic in his eyes. Especially the mounts of the 5-star army, they were something he had never seen or heard of before. People often feared things they didn't know, and this Ming general was one such person. Among the 30,000 soldiers, 10,000 of them were Ming archers. They had already received orders to draw their bows and reload them. Once the enemy got close, they would release their arrows and heavily injure the enemy. 1,000 meters, 800 meters, 600 meters, 400 meters, 300 meters. They stopped. The northern Ming soldier who was in charge of observing the distance between the two sides cried out in alarm. He couldn't understand why they suddenly stopped charging. Just as he cried out in alarm, the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Daqiang, also gave the order to start shooting. More than 8,095 style guns, which far surpassed that era, spewed out tongues of flame at the same time. One could imagine how magnificent this scene was. With no one able to attack them, the 4th Division was like an aircraft carrier on land, constantly firing bullets as they slowly moved forward. As they continued to advance, one by one, the Ming soldiers were hit by bullets and fell to the ground. They were like wheat being harvested, unable to struggle at all. This scene caused the 10,000 northern Ming archers to be dumbfounded. Seeing their comrades fall to the ground one after another, and the arrows they shot were simply not enough to cover the distance. In other words, at this moment, they could only passively take a beating without the slightest ability to retaliate. The originally high morale of the soldiers quickly plummeted. No one knew who was the first to be afraid, as he threw down the bow in his hand and turned to flee. This action caused even more archers to abandon their bows and flee. When the situation began to spread, no matter how much the Ming general shouted, it was no longer of any use. Hold on, hold on. Where are the pikemen? If there are any deserters, kill them without mercy. Seeing that the battle formation was about to be destroyed, and it was caused by deserters, the Ming general's face burned with anger. After the pikemen received the order, although they were unwilling and did not want to attack their comrades, they could not disobey a military order. They had no choice but to stab forward with the pikes in their hands. In just a few flashes of pikes, more than 1,000 Ming army archers fell, and they finally managed to stop their retreat. Where are the sharpshooters? Do you see that Ming general on the horse? Shoot him down. Ling Daqiang was naturally overjoyed when he saw that the enemy's formation was in chaos after a wave of attacks. However, seeing that the situation was about to be stabilized, how could he be willing to give up? He scanned the surroundings with his binoculars and locked onto the Ming general. There was no lack of sharpshooters in the cold vanguard army. They usually had good eyesight and were fed countless bullets. At this moment, when they heard their division commander's order, several sharpshooters searched for the Ming general on the horse. Soon after, they locked onto him and the sound of gunfire rang out. Bullets whizzed out of the barrels and hit the Ming general's body. The Ming general was still shouting something, trying to turn the situation around. However, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. Then, another bullet hit him between the eyebrows. At this moment, he lost consciousness and fell from the horse in front of him. With the sudden death of the general, the Ming army, without a unified command, was in complete chaos. Although there were still a few captains who were desperately shouting something, trying to get the position of commander in this chaotic situation, their shouts were like small boats in the middle of a stormy sea. They were completely useless. After another round of gunfire, the archers of the 4th Division fell to the ground. The situation that had just stabilized was once again thrown into chaos. However, this time no one gave the pikemen an order, and no one stopped the archers from retreating. Not only that, even the pikemen turned their spearheads and ran away. The army was defeated like a landslide. As the Ming soldiers turned around and fled, many of them even threw their weapons to the ground in order to increase their speed. The situation on the battlefield began to change. As the Ming army frantically retreated, the countless stakes and bags of iron caltrops that were hidden behind them were completely exposed. Division Commander Jianghu, who was already prepared, used his binoculars to clearly see this scene. He couldn't help but feel that it was a close call. If it wasn't for the 6th young master stopping him, the 1st Cavalry Division would have suffered a great loss. The stakes could affect the speed and offensive power of the cavalry. As for the iron caltrops, it was needless to say. With its 4 sharp points, it was enough to cause heavy damage to the cavalry. How ruthless. Since that's the case, don't blame us for being impolite. Come, all warriors, charge with me. Let's let them know the consequences of facing the wrath of the world's #1 Cavalry Division. Charge. The 8,000 cavalrymen who couldn't wait any longer roared and charged forward. The earth seemed to tremble as dust filled the air. Their momentum was unstoppable. In the middle of the Ming army, the Ming soldier who was sent to deliver a message saw Li Tong and Chindula. He reported the scene he saw. Not cavalry but infantry? What's going on? Li Tong asked with a face full of surprise. The situation was far beyond his expectations, making Li Tong feel that he couldn't control the situation. We don't know. We only saw that the infantry were extremely fast. They seem to be riding on something that we don't recognize. That thing can increase a person's speed. The soldier who delivered the message tried his best to describe what he saw with words. Riding on something can increase their speed? Li Tong, who was repeating this sentence, suddenly changed his expression. As expected of a general from the capital of Ming, Li Tong's knowledge was far greater than Chindula's. After hearing this, he quickly remembered something, and that was the bicycle. Although the bicycle wasn't produced in the outside world yet, some legends about it had already spread. Li Tong had heard of it before, but he had never seen it with his own eyes. When he thought of the bicycle, Li Tong naturally thought of Bugnam of Gojosian. It was said that only Bugnam of Gojosian could command such an army. Could it be him? As the saying goes, a man's name is like a tree's shadow. Although many people thought that Bugnam of Gojosian was being rebellious by commanding an army, no one dared to underestimate him. However, no one dared to look down on him. On the contrary, they were quite fearful of him. Li Tong was one such person. If it was really Bugnam of Gojosian who appeared here, Li Tong would have to think carefully. This was an existence that was regarded as a war god. No one had ever taken advantage of him before. How could he resist such a person? Just as Li Tong was struggling in his heart, he suddenly heard a burst of firecracker-like sounds. This sound startled him, and he immediately thought of the Flintlock army. Li Tong, who had a trace of suspicion, was now certain. His originally confident spirit was hit. He almost instinctively shouted, "Oh no, it's Bugnam of Gojosian. It seems that we can't take down the Jianghu left guard. Retreat, prepare to retreat." Is Bugnam of Gojosian here? Chindula, who was on the side, asked as if he hadn't asked the question yet. Then he looked at Li Tong and said, "General Li, we have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Even if he's here, what's there to be afraid of? We can still fight him." Fight my ass. Didn't you hear those gunshots? On such an open land, what can we use to fight? Let's retreat. Li Tong was still very self-aware. This was not only because of the fear in his heart. More importantly, he didn't expect Yang Qindong to appear here, so he didn't make any preparations. Under such circumstances, it was obviously unfair to fight with him. As long as the army could be saved, there would be no need to worry about not having a chance to fight in the future. However, if the army was lost, there would be no chance for revenge. Li Tong was the commander. Naturally, no one dared to disobey his order to retreat. Although Chindula looked unwilling, he could only nod and agree in the end. Then, the Ming army that was attacking the city began to retreat step by step. The siege situation also changed because of this. The tower that was about to be breached slowly became quiet. What's going on? Tong Long was prepared to fight to the death with the enemy, but the change in front of him made him a little confused. Commander Bai Shuang, who was prepared to fight outside the city, seemed to have thought of something. He then listened carefully and vaguely heard gunshots. He immediately laughed and said, I know, it must be the teacher. Ah, brothers, Bugnam of Gojoseon is here. It's time for us to fight back with all our strength. Chapter 1157. Bai Shuang had studied with Yang Qindong before, so he was quite familiar with the sounds of guns. Adding on the fact that the Bai Ming army suddenly stopped attacking the city, he immediately thought of a certain possibility. When they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had arrived, the 2,400 cavalry soldiers all began to cheer loudly. From this, it could be seen just how high of a position Yang Qindong held in these soldiers' hearts was. Even Tong Long, who had never seen Yang Qindong before, became extremely excited. During this period of time he had only heard about Bugnam of Gojoseon, and he was about to come out of his cocoon. Now that he could finally see his face, how could he not be excited? Let's go, charge out with this commander and meet up with Bugnam of Gojoseon. Bai Shuang raised his two blades high, shouting loudly in excitement. Following the shout, the city gates opened from the inside, and 4,500 cavalry soldiers charged out like a whirlwind. Speaking of which, it was quite a coincidence. When Bai Shuang and the others charged out, it was precisely when the Bai Ming army was retreating. The 20,000 Bai Ming army that was originally arranged to deal with them had also just cleaned up their things and were retreating. Suddenly, intense battle cries sounded from behind them. When they turned around to take a look, their expressions immediately changed greatly. Li Tong, who had already left the large tent and was leading his soldiers to flee, also saw this scene. He sighed. These 5-star army cavalry were too cunning, actually charging out after he withdrew his defenses. Under this type of timing, even if he gave the order to launch a counterattack now, it was clearly too late. Retreat, retreat, retreat towards the 30,000 guards. Li Tong, who knew that the situation was already in his favor, didn't turn around, instead turning around and fleeing. Behind him was the vast and mighty Bai Ming army. In front of them, who would be afraid of death? That was why at this moment, they actually displayed their life's potential, each one running faster than the other. It was to the extent where not long after, the army responsible for transporting the supplies became the last group. General, what do we do? Seeing that there were already no more troops to protect him, the logistics officer in charge of transporting the supplies asked the leading general. Closing his eyes, the general knew that once the provisions were lost, he would be beheaded according to military discipline. But now that he didn't have the ability to protect these provisions, he simply shook his head and said, Forget it, they were the ones who abandoned us. It's not that we didn't try our best. Tell the brothers if you want to escape, then run. If you can't escape, then surrender and wait for the 5-star army to come and take over. If we go like this, General, we will die. Why don't we burn the provisions? That way we'll be able to account for it. The logistics officer suggested. No. The general immediately shook his head. If we really do that, we will definitely anger the 5-star army. At that time we won't even have a chance to live. Alright, I've made up my mind. If you want to run, then run. If you don't want to run, then stay here with me and wait for the 5-star army to pick us up. Most of the people transporting the provisions were people with average military skills. How could their speed be compared to the speed of war horses? Most of them stayed behind. Only a small number of them ran away with the mentality of a fluke. After a stick of incense's time, Commander Bai Shuang brought the cavalry over. Along the way, who knew how many of the Bai Ming army were killed and how many were captured? When he arrived in front of the transport team and saw that this team of thousands of people was actually waiting for him, he was very curious and came over on his horse. Surrendered General Zhao Xing greets the general. A general wearing a Kiliarka's armor half knelt in front of Bai Shuang. General Zhao, why didn't you all escape? At the very least, you can burn the provisions. That way, even if you escape, you can account for it to your superiors, right? Bai Shuang asked with a trace of suspicion. The situation was so abnormal that he had to be careful in case the other party was pretending to surrender. We can't burn them. Zhao Xing shook his head and said, with these provisions, countless people can eat and many people can survive. If we burn them, then the only ones who will suffer will be the soldiers and civilians who have no food to eat. Zhao Xing can't do something that would incur the wrath of the heavens and people just to avoid a punishment. Who would have thought that a mere chiliarch in charge of escorting grain would have such knowledge? This was beyond White Shuang's expectations. He carefully sized up Zhao Xing's appearance again and memorized it in his heart. Then he took out a token from his bosom and said, "This is my position token. Take this back to Jian Province's left guard city. If anyone asks you about the provisions, you can show this token. Do you have any questions? After taking the token, Zhao Xing nodded solemnly. General Bai, don't worry. I know what to do. Good. We still have to chase after the enemy. You can go about your business. After he finished speaking, Bai Shuang spurred his horse and continued to chase after the Ming army. He didn't turn back to look at Zhao Xing as if nothing had happened. When the group was far away, Tong Long, who was following in the group, asked Bai Shuang with a puzzled expression, Commander, do you really believe that Zhao Xing won't escape and will deliver the provisions to the city? I'll take a gamble. Also, teacher is here. This area will belong to the 5-star army. He won't be able to escape even if he wants to. Bai Shuang chuckled and continued to spur his horse forward. He did have the intention to test Zhao Xing. If this person really delivered the provisions to Jian Province's left guard city, then he would report this matter to Yang Qindong. This person might be a talent. On the other hand, if this person escaped, then he would also report this matter to Yang Qindong. Anyone who dared to deceive the 5-star army should be prepared for revenge. This was just a small interlude. It wouldn't affect the overall situation. Bai Shuang led thousands of cavalry and chased after them. Although they didn't catch up with Li Tong and Chandula, they still caught up with many of the Ming army that had fallen behind. In the end, they brought back 5,000 captives. In this battle, the Ming army retreated without a fight. They lost a total of 40,000 men. 7,000 of them died in battle. The rest were all captives. When Bai Shuang brought the 5,000 captives back to the Jian Province's left guard city, Yang Qindong had already entered the city and was listening to reports from all sides. When Bai Shuang and Tong Long appeared in the main hall of the residence, Yang Qindong's loud laughter rang out. Bai Shuang, it has been hard on you this time. You deserve the most credit for being able to destroy the enemy. Teacher Xia, this is what Bai Shuang should do. By the way, teacher, this person is Tong Long. He made a great contribution by defeating the Jian Province's left guard city without shedding a drop of blood. Bai Shuang took this opportunity to recommend Tong Long. This was the first time Tong Long met Yang Qindong. Although he was older, for some reason when he saw Yang Qindong he was shocked by the powerful aura emitted by him. He couldn't help but kneel on the ground. This general, Tong Long, greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. May you live 1,000 years. Haha, there's no need for that. We can talk casually. Yang Qindong chuckled. Then he sized up Tong Long. He found that this person was not only handsome but also extraordinary. He was very happy. After considering that the other party had made a great contribution, he said, Tong Long, this king wants to establish a reinforced cavalry regiment of Liaodong. How about you be the first commander? By the way, this is a cavalry unit of 5,000 people. Do you have the confidence to lead them well? Tong Long had just been promoted to battalion commander. It was only because of the war situation that he was able to lead 2,500 men. Once the situation returned to normal, he could only lead 400 men. Now that the number had suddenly increased by more than 10 times, how could he not be excited and grateful? What are you waiting for? Quickly thank Bugnam of Gojoseon. Seeing that Tong Long was a little dumbfounded, Bai Shuang immediately reminded him. Oh, this subordinate thanks Bugnam of Gojoseon for promoting me. I will definitely be a good commander and create a strong army. I will not disappoint Bugnam of Gojoseon. Ah, good. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Ming has the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. My 5-star army also has a Liaodong Cavalry regiment. When the time comes, we will see who is more powerful. Right now, this unit is still lacking some core strength. Do you have any talents that you can recommend? Yang Qindong asked with a smile. A cavalry unit of 5,000 people was only a regiment. It could be seen how much importance Yang Qindong placed on this unit. If this kind of unit was only given to Tong Long, no one would be at ease. The others had to be personally appointed by Yang Qindong in order to ensure the loyalty of the unit. Everyone was clear about this point. Immediately, everyone suggested some candidates. Soon, there were suitable candidates for the 12 battalion commanders of the Liaodong Iron Cavalry Regiment. Next was the vice commander. Regarding this problem, no one had any good opinions. First, we have to look at the responsibilities of the vice commander. According to the rules of the 5-star army, the vice commander was to assist the commander in managing the entire unit. Only when the commander was not around would the vice commander have the right to make decisions. Normally, the vice commander would be in charge of logistics. Only with good service would the unit be able to win more battles. Considering that the Liaodong Cavalry Regiment was a reinforced unit, there would be many difficult missions in the future. This vice commander would not only be able to manage logistics, it would be best if he could also fight well. This kind of talent was naturally hard to find. Everyone looked at each other and couldn't find a suitable candidate. Although there were vice commanders in each division, no one wanted to recommend their vice commander. After all, it wasn't a promotion, it was just a transfer. Looking at the current Liaodong Iron Cavalry Regiment, it was likely that the vice commander wouldn't even be considered a transfer. No one had a good candidate. Yang Qindong asked with a calm expression, "What? Is no one willing to give up?" Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be a little unhappy, everyone was a little anxious at the moment. They were wondering if they should recommend someone from their own army's deputy commander. But before they could say anything, Commander Bai Shuang suddenly thought of someone and said, "Teacher, I have a suitable candidate. It's just that I don't know much about him. Why do I need teacher to look at him?" Chapter 1158. Suitable but not understanding. This sentence itself was somewhat contradictory. Bai Shuang's words also attracted everyone's attention. Considering that he didn't make it clear, Bai Shuang smiled bitterly and explained in detail how he met Zhao Xing on the way. "Zhao Xing? I know this person. He escorted the provisions to Jianghu's Zuowei city. Because it was related to logistics, I went to take a look. I still have a deep impression of this person," Beta Persei, who was standing beside Yang Qindong, said after Bai Shuang finished speaking. "Did he really escort the provisions back?" Bai Shuang's eyes flashed as he asked. "That's right." Beta Persei chuckled and continued, "Not only did he transport the provisions back, but he also brought 2,108 surrendered soldiers. According to him, he had a total of 2,200 soldiers. 92 of them escaped for some reason, and most of them came with him to surrender. Oh, by the way, when I went, his soldiers were lined up neatly, even the weapons in their hands were placed neatly together. To be honest, it's the first time I've seen someone surrender like this." The other officers couldn't help but nod in agreement. It wasn't that he hadn't seen people surrender before, but most of them were disheveled and dispirited, looking as if they had lost all hope in life. Their weapons were thrown everywhere, so he had never seen such a carefree and effortless surrender before. Hearing this, even Yang Qindong couldn't help but be curious. "There's such a wonderful person? Come, bring him here so I can see him." "I'll go." Beta Persei agreed. "I'll go with second brother." Bai Shuang thought for a moment and stepped forward. He thought highly of Zhao Xing. Since his teacher wanted to see him, he wanted to say a few words to remind him. The two walked out of the main hall together. Yang Qindong looked at the people who stayed behind, and his gaze fell on the face of the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Tianhu. "Commander Tian, how do you feel about this battle?" "Awesome," Tianhu said without thinking. In this battle, the 4 regiments of cavalry had killed and captured twice the number of enemies. Most importantly, there were almost no heavy casualties on their side. The number of dead and injured did not exceed 100. This kind of difference in casualties greatly comforted him. However, he immediately recalled that they had almost been ambushed. Thinking about how the dozen or so cavalry scouts had been surrounded by the 4th Division and the Black Knights, and how not a single one had managed to escape, his old face turned red again. Tianhu's face suddenly turned red, which made Yang Qindong swallow back the words he wanted to say. Sometimes it was okay to give a little pressure, but if the pressure was too much, it was very likely that it would be unable to bear the burden and eventually collapse. The 1st Cavalry Division was his weapon. Naturally, he didn't want anything to happen to it. This time, Yang Qindong called out Tianhu's name not to remind him of anything, but to consider the current situation. He wanted to expand the size of the 1st Cavalry Division. On the grasslands, there was a very powerful Biming army called the Liaodong Cavalry. It was said that their strength was extraordinary, and they had a large number of people. They had already expanded from 50,000 to 70,000. Faced with the cavalry elites who came and went like the wind, firearms could only be used to defend but not to attack. Yang Qindong set his sights on the 1st Cavalry Division. Cavalry against cavalry, speed against speed. Even if they couldn't win, they could at least suppress the threat they brought to him. Looking at the 1st Cavalry Division, they indeed had the qualifications and strength to fight against any opponent. The only thing they lacked was the number of soldiers, only 10,000. Against an enemy 7 times their number, even if they were powerful, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Therefore, expanding the number of soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division became an inevitable matter. Originally, Yang Qindong wanted to expand the division into an army. However, considering that there was no suitable source of soldiers, it was very likely that this would reduce their combat strength. Therefore he thought about expanding the division on a small scale first. For example, each regiment would be expanded from 2,000 to 4,000 people. This way it wouldn't reduce their combat strength too much, and it would also increase the number of people, which would be more useful at critical times. With this thought in mind, Yang Qindong looked at Tianhu and took the initiative to suggest, "Commander Tian, if you were to choose these captives first, do you have the confidence to double the current number of soldiers without affecting your own combat strength?" Tianhu was already prepared to be reprimanded by Yang Qindong. After all, he was careless in the first place. He only arranged for sentries to scout the cavalry and didn't arrange for hidden sentries. Fortunately, it was Yang Qindong who came to test him this time. If it was really the enemy, the consequences would be unimaginable. If he made a mistake, he would be punished with a plank. Tianhu didn't become arrogant because of his military exploits. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong didn't want to talk about this. Instead, he wanted to expand the division. Tianhu's eyes immediately lit up. As the opponents became stronger and stronger, especially powerful forces like Ming, which could easily take out millions of soldiers, he felt that the lack of military strength had become the biggest obstacle restricting his performance. He wanted to raise this request to Yang Qindong not too long ago. However, considering that the 1st Cavalry Division's equipment was excellent and the intensity of their training was high, once they expanded, he was afraid that he would have to pay a large sum of money every month. Over the years he had accumulated a lot of money. This was a matter of great importance. Tianhu suppressed his thoughts and didn't mention it. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong would take the initiative to mention it. How could he miss such an opportunity? He immediately stepped out of the formation and said, "Teacher, this student has already thought about this problem. As long as we carefully select and cooperate with the new veterans, our combat strength shouldn't decrease. In fact, it can definitely be improved. After all, with more soldiers their momentum would be stronger. The deterrence and attack power to the enemy would also be greater. Well, since you're so confident, then it's settled. At the very least, how many people should we expand? It would be best if we could double the current strength. Of course, if we really don't have that many suitable soldiers, we can't force it. This time what we want is a strong army, not quantity. As for how much money you need, you can tell Beta Persei later and ask him to give it to you." Yang Qindong wanted Tianhu to say this. If the executor was so confident, what else did he have to worry about? This time, he decided to increase the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division because he was very satisfied with the other party's performance. His actions of probing further confirmed his thoughts. Such an army should be larger in number so that they could better display their strength. As for the problem of money, it really wasn't too big of a problem. Not to mention anything else, the gold and silver mines discovered in the Japanese Empire were enough to solve the current financial pressure on Yangxia. Not to mention, many of the powers in Southeast Asia were now under the Yang faction, allowing them to sell more of their products. There were also many non-core items that were directly exported to other continents through the sea, bringing in countless silver taels. Whether it was an army, a force, or a country, nothing could be done without money. Yang Qindong, who had known this for a long time, had never slacked off in this aspect. Now, it seemed that the effect was very significant. This was also the foundation that allowed him to conquer the world and where his confidence lay. "Thank you, teacher. The student will do it in a while," Tianhu said excitedly. If it weren't for the fact that Yang Qindong was presiding over the meeting, he was afraid that he would have already gone to deal with this matter. As he spoke, the sound of footsteps came from outside the hall. Beta Persei, Bai Shuang and Zhao Xing walked into the hall. Then the two in front saluted and stood at attention. Only Zhao Xing knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live Yang Qindong. You may rise." Yang Qindong looked at Zhao Xing, who was now 7 feet tall, and said indifferently, "Thank you, Bugnam of Gojoseon." Zhao Xing said as he stood up and slowly raised his head. Yang Qindong's appearance reflected in his eyes. "I've heard about your matter. Since you're willing to submit to the 5-star army, this king naturally welcomes you. The provisions were escorted by you, but how do you want to deal with them?" Zhao Xing spoke slowly as if he was asking for advice, but also as if he was testing him. "Me?" Zhao Xing stretched out his right index finger and pointed at himself, then asked carefully, "I'm just a surrendered general. How can I have the right to discuss such matters?" "Hey, just say it." Bai Shuang could tell that the teacher was testing the waters, so she reminded him softly from the side. Zhao Xing had a good impression of Bai Shuang. Just like on the way here, this person had reminded him a lot. For example, he shouldn't be too afraid when he saw Bugnam of Gojoseon. On the contrary, if there was a chance, he should express his thoughts. Only by leaving a deep impression would he be put in an important position. Now that Bai Shuang had reminded him, Zhao Xing decided to voice his thoughts. He opened his mouth and said, Bugnam of Gojoseon has given this surrendered general a chance. Then this surrendered general will explain it to you. These provisions were snatched by Chindula through the second round of rations. In the process he even accidentally killed some people, causing the surrounding people to complain. If it's possible, can you give some of these provisions to the people? To be honest, their lives are too hard. This is a bitter cold land and the winter is very long. As a result, the crops grow very slowly. In order to get these provisions they have to pay a lot more than others. Zhao Xing explained some of the things he knew in great detail. He was originally a child of the Ming army. From the moment he was born, his fate could not be changed. However, he was not a person who accepted his fate. Instead, after knowing that everything was irreversible, he actively faced it. He had practiced martial arts since he was young, regardless of whether it was summer or winter. When he had time, he would go to the nearby private schools to listen to the teachers' lectures. Chapter 1159. Under the guidance of a teacher whose interest was the best, he learned many things and understood some of the principles of life. Relying on his own efforts, he became 1,000 captains. With a high position, he was able to see more of the hardships of the commoners. However, as a lowly person, his words carried little weight, and he did not know what he could do. This time, when the Emperor of Ming sent out troops to aid Liaodong, Zhao Xing, who had no backing, became a member of this difficult task. Originally, he wanted to fight for a chance to perform, but he did not expect Li Tong to value him and let him become 1,000 captains. It was because of this that he saw more of the dark side. When he saw that the food was stolen from the commoners, and that the commoners did not know how to survive this winter, he would secretly cry while eating. Now that he had the chance to express his views in front of Bugnam of Gojoseon, who loved the commoners like his own children, how could he let go of such an opportunity? Then he explained everything in detail. When he spoke about the depths of his emotions, he even shed tears. Influenced by Zhao Xing, some of the officers in the other halls also involuntarily shed tears. Many of them had experienced hardships, and listening to these words, they seemed to be pulled back to the past. Only Yang Qindong sat there expressionlessly, not affected in the slightest. This was not to say that his heart was hard, but because he had seen too much, he had long become numb. If he cried whenever something happened, how could he have everything he had now? A strong person must have a strong heart. Rather than crying whenever something happened, it was better to think of a way to change everything. This was what a leader should do. Zhao Xing, who stood there, spoke for the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn. Only when he was almost done did he realize that this was not his own military camp, but Bugnam of Gojoseon's discussion hall. He immediately shut his mouth, and then with a look of begging for forgiveness, he once again knelt on the ground. Only after Zhao Xing finished speaking did everyone regain their senses. Then their gazes landed on Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table. The main hall once again quieted down, and Yang Qindong's voice resounded in everyone's ears. The common people live in poverty, and this is the incompetence of the great Ming dynasty's government. That's why we have to change everything. Since they can't do it, then let's find someone who can. I believe this will be a blessing for the people. Bugnam of Gojoseon is wise, the generals replied in unison. Yang Qindong raised his hands and pressed them down. With just this movement, the main hall returned to silence. Then he looked at Zhao Xing, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "The people are indeed suffering, but there isn't much food in the army either. If we want to fight, we need to maintain sufficient physical strength and nutrition. Therefore, it's better to provide these rations to the soldiers first." When Yang Qindong said this, it was equivalent to making a decision. Naturally, the others did not have any objections. Even if they did, they would only report it to Yang Qindong in private. However, Zhao Xing did not know about this rule. He thought that his words had already convinced Bugnam of Gojoseon, or at least the other generals. He did not expect this to be the result. Thus he said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, can't you give a portion of the food to the common people? At least let them survive this year's cold winter." Are you doubting this king's decision? Yang Qindong, who had a calm expression a moment ago, suddenly changed his expression. A powerful pressure involuntarily landed on Zhao Xing's body. Zhao Xing, who originally wanted to say something, was suppressed by this pressure. His face instantly flushed red, and the feeling of being stared at by a wild beast made it difficult for him to even breathe. What Yang Qindong used was a visual attack that was close to the Grandmaster level. Under this aura, unless one had a firm belief, not many people could withstand it. Being targeted, Zhao Xing's expression was extremely ugly. He was using all his strength to resist all of this. Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be burning with anger for some reason, the fear in his heart became weaker and weaker. At this moment, his mind was filled with the suffering of the common people after they did not have food to eat and even death. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became. Zhao Xing knew that if he did not say these words today, he would not have the chance to say them in the future. Then he did not know where he got the strength from, but he actually broke through the layers of pressure from the visual attack. He forced himself to raise his head and said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, everyone says that you love the common people like your own children. Please make a decision for the common people of Liaodong. I Zhao Xing thank you on behalf of them." When he finished speaking, thump, thump. Zhao Xing kowtowed non-stop. Even when blood flowed from his forehead, he still had no intention of stopping. "Zhao Xing, what are you doing? Hurry up and stop." Seeing that Zhao Xing was actually using this to threaten his teacher, Bai Shuang was so scared that his face turned pale. He reached out to stop Zhao Xing. "Commander Bai, thank you for your kindness. I have made up my mind. If Bugnam of Gojoseon does not agree, I will kowtow until I die here." Zhao Xing's eyes were filled with determination. He had worked hard since he was young, but other than the title of Jianghu, it could be said that he had achieved nothing. Now that he had become a surrendered general, he was afraid that he would lose the title of Jianghu in the future. If that was the case, what was the meaning of life? He might as well take advantage of this opportunity to stand up for the common people. Even if he died, it could be considered as having been born into this world. At this moment, Zhao Xing was going all out against Yang Qindong. The other officers were shocked. They had never seen anyone who dared to treat Yang Qindong with such an attitude. They could even imagine the consequences that Zhao Xing would have to face. Admittedly, Zhao Xing's words were indeed moving, and it could be seen that he was a general who truly cared for the people. However, the words of a lowly person did not carry much weight. Furthermore, Yang Qindong was not wrong. Before the large amounts of supplies were sent up, the army needed food. Especially now that there were tens of thousands of captives. These people needed food the moment they opened their mouths. If they were not appeased, it would be hard to avoid big problems. Everyone had their own reasons, so no one else could say anything. They could only wait for Yang Qindong to make a decision. Zhao Xing was also a man of few words. After saying these words, he closed his eyes, looking like he could do whatever he wanted. The atmosphere in the main hall became very tense because of this. Everyone's heartbeats could be faintly heard. On the main seat, Yang Qindong had already retracted his aura. He did not expect Zhao Xing to be able to break through his eye attack. From this, it could be seen that this person was indeed a talent. Those words came from the bottom of his heart. If he was not prepared to die, he would not be able to do this. It was rare to have someone who loved the people so much. Yang Qindong had a good impression of him. After all, not everyone who cared about the people could face death with equanimity. Of course, he had to use such a talent for himself. Just as everyone was waiting for Yang Qindong to announce the result, he said, "Order, promote Zhao Xing to be the deputy commander of the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment. He is to assist Tong Long in the preparation and training of the army. Order the other divisions to prepare for the army's departure in 3 days." The sudden order confused everyone, especially Zhao Xing, whose mind was filled with questions. Not only was he not killed, he was promoted instead. What was going on? He was completely confused. However, he still remembered one thing. What about the food for the people during winter? Thinking of this, he directly asked, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, food?" At this time, Zhao Xing did not show any excitement because he was promoted. Instead, he was still concerned about the food problem of the people. Yang Qindong was very impressed. "The food problem is easy to solve. For this year and next year, I will not collect any agricultural tax from the people of Liaodong, which is the 3 eastern provinces. The food collected can be used for our own use. There won't be any problems, right?" The reason why he was worried that the people of the 3 eastern provinces would not have any food to survive the winter was that Bugnam of Gojoseon would send people to collect food at the end of autumn. If the food tax was removed, the harvest this year would be enough for the new year and they would be much richer. At this moment, Zhao Xing finally understood that it was not that Bugnam of Gojoseon did not hear what he said. He was just testing him. Thinking of how the people of the 3 eastern provinces would not starve to death if the agricultural tax was not collected for 2 years, Zhao Xing did not know how many lives this would save. He immediately fell to the ground again and shouted, "Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon! Alright, you are thinking for the people. How can I not fulfill your wish? They will be my people in the future. Of course, I will not watch them starve. This matter will be announced in a while. There is no need to mention it. Now you only have 5 days to prepare the army. We can't wait any longer at the beginning city. When he said this, Yang Qindong's eyes had a hint of seriousness. Sixth young master, don't we have to fight Li Tong and the others? Will they come to find trouble with us because of this? Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 4th Army Division, asked worriedly when he heard that they were going to enter the grasslands. That's why we have to leave some people behind to watch them. Why don't the 4th Army Division stay behind? You also know that although we have opened up a supply route to the beginning city, it is not very safe. Therefore, we need someone to stay behind to continue suppressing the Ming army. This task belongs to the 4th Army Division. Yang Qindong said with a look as if he had long prepared for this. When Ling Daqiang heard this, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Sixth young master, we, the 4th Army Division, will carry out your decision. This was not because Ling Daqiang raised a question, so Yang Qindong arranged for them to stay behind. It was because he already had this idea. In comparison, although the 4th Army Division had bicycles in their hands and could increase their speed, the journey was too long. By the time they arrived, their legs would not listen to them. It would be easier for the cavalry to travel. Besides, they would only be defending and not attacking. The 4th Army Division, who were all firearms, would be of great use. Chapter 1160. Of course, Yang Qindong wouldn't just leave the 4th Division behind. What if the Ming army went around them? Therefore, he also left behind the new army that was rushing towards the Jianghu left guard. That was more than 20,000 cavalry. If they stayed behind to cooperate with the 4th Division, they would be able to ensure the safety of the 3 eastern provinces. As for the next step, they would need to wait for the army from the Japanese Empire and the 7th Army there to arrive in the 3 eastern provinces. Only then would they be able to hand over the defense and head to the grasslands. Leaving behind the 4th Division and the new army, Yang Qindong would bring the 1st Cavalry Division and the Liaodong Cavalry Strengthening Regiment to support the first city. Although there weren't many troops, they were all cavalry. They were elite enough to guarantee that they could reach the grasslands in the shortest time possible. Considering the urgency of time, they only had 5 days to prepare. After 5 days, the new army would arrive at the Jianghu left guard. That was also the time when Yang Qindong would leave with his troops. Overall, it was still quite tense. Fortunately, he could train as he hurried along, saving some time. After the order was given, the various divisions started to get busy, especially the 1st Cavalry Division and the newly established Liaodong Cavalry Strengthening Regiment that needed to be doubled. There was a lot of work to be done to expand and build one. Fortunately, with the help of the 4th Division and the Black Cavalry, although time was tight, it wasn't impossible. The biggest advantage of the 5-star army was that they didn't have to worry about food and weapons. In other words, once the new army was organized, they could immediately start training. This was something that other armies couldn't compare to. At the same time as the expansion of the army, the news that Bugnam of Gojoseon had ordered the 3 eastern provinces to be exempted from agricultural taxes was also announced to the world. After the news spread out, the people of Liaodong rushed to spread the news and were overjoyed. Although the 3 eastern provinces were bitter and cold, they had a large territory, especially the black soil that was given to them by the heavens. It was quite fertile. Although they only had 1 season a year, the yield was not low. Moreover, because of the quality of the soil, the crops they planted were very plump. If it wasn't for the fact that they had to feed the hundreds of thousands of Liaodong army, the standard of living here would be quite good. At least, there wouldn't be any cases of people freezing to death. Since the establishment of the Great Ming Dynasty, Liaodong, which was the early New Urgan-Dusi region, was not very important, which was why the people here had always been poor. Now that Yang Qindong had suddenly changed their lives, the people of Bugnam of Gojoseon, Liaodong region, Liaodong's reputation. After the good policy was sent to Lu Ji, the governor of the 3 eastern provinces in Terran City, he and General Yi Ligang discussed and immediately launched a conscription. They preached to the people that if they wanted to ensure the existence of a good policy, they had to ensure the existence of Bugnam of Gojoseon's regime. This required everyone to contribute to protect him. With good publicity and the fact that Lu Ji still had a lot of money and food left behind by Yang Qindong, the expansion plan of the 3 eastern provinces was quickly implemented. When the source of soldiers was no longer a problem, General Yi Ligang also improved the quality of the soldiers. The 3 eastern provinces were now thriving. With money came soldiers. It didn't take long for Yi Ligang to take over the defense of the 4th Division and the new army. These two armies were also able to withdraw. On the morning of the second day after the change of defense, these two armies escorted the food and went straight to the direction of the first city. 30,000 guards. It was just a small town where Jianghu was located. It could be described as a small town. At this moment, it was already overcrowded and very noisy. Li Tong's army had been defeated and had come here. Along with him were 140,000 defeated soldiers. Originally, he was prepared to go with Chen Dula to the Jian Province Guard or the Shenyang Central Guard. Those were all big cities, so it was naturally easier to arrange for soldiers like them. What he didn't expect was that these two cities rejected him because of the lack of food. To put it bluntly, these people just wanted Li Tong to become the first line of defense for the five-star army's attack so that they could protect their safety. Even though Li Tong and Chen Dula were clear about this, they were somewhat helpless. It was because Li Tong had received the imperial order to deal with the five-star army. Now that the two cities had rejected him in this name, he really had no other choice. Staying in the 30,000 guards, seeing the food decrease day by day, the morale of the soldiers also decreased day by day. Li Tong was very worried that Bugnam of Gojoseon would suddenly lead the army to attack. If that was the case, the small 30,000 guards wouldn't be able to defend at all. In order to prevent the worst situation from happening, Li Tong sent out large amounts of scouts to keep a close eye on the Jian province left guard's every move, so that when true danger arrived, he could immediately lead the army to react. As for whether he would fight or run at that time, he himself didn't know either. As far as Li Tong was concerned, every day passed in torment, to the extent where he couldn't even go out to face the soldiers in the city. All of this was because the provisions promised by the Ming imperial court still hadn't arrived. Back when he was leading the troops, Li Tong had already been worried about the issue of provisions, and because of this he even brought up this issue in the imperial court. He never expected to provoke public anger, to the extent where when he set out, the conclusion given by the higher-ups was that he had to raise his own provisions after arriving in the Liaodong region. When the time came, the various guards in Liaodong region would support him greatly. But now, most of the Liaodong region had already been occupied by the five-star army, and the original capital of Liaodong region, Terran City, was also owned by Bugnam of Gojoseon. It was already impossible to raise provisions here. After reporting everything that happened here to the imperial court, Li Tong was like a criminal waiting for the verdict to come out. If the provisions were insufficient, how could the army fight? Could it be that they had to fight on an empty stomach? It was said that the emperor didn't lack hungry soldiers. At this moment, not only did Li Tong scold those civil officials in the imperial court, but he also scolded Daizongzhu Qiyu in his heart. Since you don't give me any provisions, I'll just retreat when the five-star army arrives. After waiting for 4 days, there was still no movement. Even the surrounding city guards didn't provide any support. Li Tong said hatefully in his heart. Just as he was scolding everyone in his heart, there were hurried footsteps outside the courtyard. Then Chen Dula appeared in front of him and said, "General Li, the five-star army has left the city." "What? Don't tell me they're coming here? If that's the case, we have to leave quickly. Most of the five-star army is cavalry and they're extremely fast." When Li Tong heard this, he said with a panicked expression. Chen Dula saw the reaction and felt disdain for him. With this little bit of courage, he wanted to deal with the five-star army in Bugnam of Gojoseon? He didn't know what the imperial court was thinking, sending such a cowardly general. Chen Dula looked down on Li Tong in his heart, but when he considered that the other party had an army of 140,000 soldiers, even if he was dissatisfied, he wouldn't show it. He acted as if he didn't hear Li Tong's words and said, "Good news. Although the five-star army has left the city, they didn't come here. Instead, they went straight to the west. It seems like they're preparing to pass through here and go to the grasslands. Hihi, Origin City is now surrounded by Ming and the world of Wara. I'm afraid they'll want to help us out." "Really?" While digesting this news, Li Tong asked very carefully, "They won't suddenly take a detour and come to our 30,000 soldiers, right?" "No, they won't. Even if it's true, I've already arranged for hundreds of scouts to keep an eye on them. If there's a change in the situation, we'll immediately receive the news." Chen Dula shook his head. "Good, that's good. Hihi, we'll be safe now that the main force of the five-star army has left," Li Tong said with a sigh of relief. Seeing that Li Tong only had such a small thought, Chen Dula shook his head lightly. In his eyes, this wasn't a matter of whether he was safe or not, but an opportunity to take back everything. No matter what, he was still the commander of the Jian province left guard. Now that the city was gone, his position as commander existed in name only. If he wanted to seize power again, he had to take back the city. All of this could only be done by relying on Li Tong. Generally, you see, the 5-star army has left. Even Bugnam of Gojoseon has left with the troops. Should we also take action? Chin Dula asked tentatively. Take action? What action? Are we going to stop Bugnam of Gojoseon from leaving? Don't joke around, we can't defeat them. Li Tong shook his head. He wasn't stupid enough to throw away his life. No, General Li misunderstood. I'm saying that since Bugnam of Gojoseon has left, the Jian province left guard must be defenseless. This is the best opportunity for us to take back the city. Once we succeed, General Li will have made a great contribution. If the emperor knows, he will also reward you. Chin Dula moved forward and instigated. Reward? Li Tong's expression changed when he heard this. If a general didn't want to make a contribution, then he definitely wasn't a good general. He was indeed tempted. However, when he thought about the fact that the army was almost out of food, how could such an army win a battle? He immediately shook his head and replied, No, we're currently lacking in food. It's fine if we don't fight. We won't starve to death even if we eat 1 meal a day. However, if we fight a war, how can we do it without sufficient physical strength? This. Chin Dula, who wanted to take back the Jian province left guard, rolled his eyes. In the end, in order to achieve his goal, he said fiercely, It doesn't matter, General Li. As long as you agree to send troops, I'll take care of the food issue. I can borrow some from the Jian province left guard and Shenyang central guard. I think with my old face I can at least find some. Chin Dula was putting in a lot of effort. Li Tong was displeased when he heard this. Previously, no matter how he begged him to get some food, he couldn't do it. Now, in order to take back the Jian province left guard, there was a way. This was just a selfish person. Chapter 1161. Li Tong wanted to say that food was not enough, but considering that he also needed to make a contribution, it was better not to fall out with Chin Dula, so he nodded. Okay, as long as we have food, we can send troops to the Jianzhou left guard. No matter what, we have to help General Chin take back the territory. Chin Dula knew very well that Li Tong was not doing this to help him, but to make a contribution. However, the two of them now had the same request, so it was not the time to undermine him. He nodded and said, Okay, leave it to me. Speaking of which, Chin Dula was indeed quite capable. With his old face, he managed to borrow enough food to last his army for 20 days from the nearby guard station. With this time in his view, it was not a problem to take down the Jianzhou left guard. As for how to solve the problem of food at that time, he just needed to collect the food tax from the nearby people. In order to not be punished, Chin Dula had long forgotten about the suffering of the people. Ming capital, Yamen of the Ministry of Revenue. The Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Secretary and Minister of Justice, Su Yozhen, walked in steady steps. The officials of the Ministry of Revenue hurriedly came out to greet him. Soon, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also came out in a neat official uniform. Oh, I don't know. Lord Su, please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Aha, Lord Jin is too polite. Su Yozhen smiled and laughed. The two ministers walked into the Yamen of the Ministry of Revenue together. As they walked, Jin Lian asked with confusion, Lord Su, why have you come to the Ministry of Revenue? Oh, it's because of the war in Liaodong. Li Tong lost his food, and now hundreds of thousands of soldiers don't even have food to eat. This is not good. How can they win the war? That's why I'm here to see if I can send them some rations as soon as possible. Su Yozhen said with a compassionate expression. As the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian was naturally very clear about Li Tong's request for food. He had asked the emperor about this, and the answer he received was that he needed to provide for the grassland war first. If there was anything else, he could just support Li Tong. In this regard, Jin Lian fully understood the emperor's intention. This was also the reason why Li Tong had repeatedly sent memorials, but had not seen a single bit of money or grain. But now that Su Yozhen had greeted him about this matter, Jin Lian naturally didn't dare to neglect this popular person in front of the emperor. He didn't want to offend Su Yozhen, but he also didn't want her to disobey the emperor's orders. Thus he asked tentatively, Lord Su, His Majesty's intention is to provide for the grassland war first. If there is any surplus. Look, His Majesty said that if there is any left, it can be given to General Li Tong. Do you have any left now? Su Yozhen grasped the loophole in Jin Lian's words and asked. There are, but they are all prepared for the army that is fighting in the grasslands. Sir Su, you also know that they are fighting against the main forces of the 5-star army. Who knows how long the battle will last? Jin Lian answered with a troubled expression. However, he didn't know that when he said these words, he had actually fallen into the other party's trap. Just as Jin Lian finished speaking, Su Yozhen's laughter sounded. Lord Jin, I'm afraid that you are joking with me. You said that we are going to face the main forces of the 5-star army on the grasslands. Then I want to ask, is the main forces more powerful than Bugnam of Gojoseon? He is now in the Liaodong region. If General Li Tong is defeated because he doesn't have enough money and grain support, once the Liaodong region is completely lost, it will directly threaten the safety of our capital. At that time, even if we take down the first city, what's the use? Can you bear this responsibility? Jin Lian was stunned when he heard the question. Indeed, if the safety of the capital was threatened, it was obviously much more important than taking down the first city. Seeing that Jin Lian was silent for a while, Su Yozhen patted him on the shoulder and said, for the safety of the capital and in case something happens in the future, the emperor may vent his anger on Sir Jin. I think that General Li Tong should be given some food and grain. Alright, this is 10,000 taels of silver. Although it's not much, it's a little token of General Li Tong's appreciation. A banknote of 10,000 taels of silver from the Yang family bank was placed in Jin Lian's hand. This was indeed sent by Li Tong. He knew that the officials of the imperial court were manipulative, so he sold everything he had to gather 20,000 taels of silver. This also made it more reasonable for Su Yozhen to appear here. Of course, the main reason why Su Yozhen agreed to do this was that Yang Qindong had given the order. Seeing that the Liaodong region was about to enter a relatively balanced phase, it was not a big deal to give them any amount of money and grain. On the contrary, if they gave more to Li Tong, they would give less to the Biming army on the grasslands. This might play a very positive role in the upcoming war there. To achieve great things, one must have a superhuman vision. For example, one must be able to see 3 or even 5 or more steps before taking one step. Obviously, Yang Qindong had this ability, and it was because of this action that it did play a big role in the future war on the grasslands, causing the Biming army to suffer a great loss. With 10,000 taels of silver and a great reason in front of him, Jin Lian chuckled. Okay, Sir Su, I know what to do. Seeing how Jin Lian accepted the banknotes with a smile and immediately called for his assistant to arrange for the delivery of the provisions, Su Yozhen stood at the side and laughed out loud. First city. More than a month ago. The scenery of the grassland in June was still very beautiful, especially when it rained. There were lush green water plants everywhere, and the green scene on the vast grassland made people feel relaxed and happy at a glance. Usually, herds could often be seen around First City, and from time to time, young Mongolian girls could be heard singing beautiful songs. But now all of this did not happen. Although the water plants were still very tall and the scenery was very beautiful, the air here was filled with a murderous aura. Suddenly, the ground trembled for no reason, and ripples appeared on the low-lying water surface. Not long after, a cavalry team of hundreds of people arrived like a gust of wind and landed here. They were the Liaodong cavalry that had recently been in the limelight on the grasslands. This place was only about 10 miles away from First City, and all of this had proved that the periphery of First City was no longer safe. Things like this didn't happen every once in a while. It had already happened 3 days ago. When these Liaodong cavalry first appeared here, they even fought with the new light cavalry regiment that was in charge of patrolling the periphery of First City. Just as the two sides started fighting, more and more Liaodong cavalry appeared in all directions. If it was not for the light cavalry regiment's quick reaction and their fast speed that allowed them to quickly leave the battlefield, no one would be able to escape. Even so, in that battle, nearly 100 light cavalry soldiers had lost their lives here forever. Since the establishment of the new army, they had rarely suffered such a big loss. Just when the Liaodong cavalry was ready to take revenge and began to dig a hole, unexpectedly, the new army did not make any movements, as if they were not the ones who suffered a loss. This also greatly boosted the morale of the Liaodong cavalry. They became more active, and the distance between them and First City was getting closer and closer. It was as if they were the number one in the world. In First City, the new army's military headquarters was holding a situation analysis meeting. All the leaders of the new army's departments were present, and they were in the midst of an intense discussion. Commander, the Liaodong cavalry is really too much. Our scouts saw from the city tower that they came 3 miles below the city this morning. This is simply provoking us and showing off. We can't let them be. Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, said angrily. Lu Zhua was considered a senior. It was difficult to find a few people who were older than him in the position of a division commander. Because this person's ability was not too outstanding, the speed of his promotion was not very fast. However, he had never used his qualifications to suppress others. In addition, his temperament was very good, and it was rare to see him angry with others. Over time, everyone thought that he had lost his temper. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his temper in public today? From this, it could be seen how arrogant the Liaodong cavalry was. Yes, 3 days ago, our light cavalry division was surrounded and lost a company of soldiers. This time it's time for us to take revenge. No matter what, we can't let them go easily. Ma Bianshi, the light cavalry division's commander, said with an angry face. The other people in the meeting did not say anything, but from the fact that no one objected, they should have the same idea. Tiger's Mane, who was sitting at the head of the table, saw everyone's reaction. He then glanced at Yang Si, who was listening beside him, and shook his head helplessly. As the commander of an army, Tiger's Mane was very good at controlling the situation. In the past, no matter whether it was a big or small matter, as long as he expressed his opinion and opened his mouth, no one would say anything against it. But this time it was obvious that everyone was angry. He was afraid that he could not rely on his personal authority to control the situation. You do it. Tiger's Mane did not want to use his power to suppress others. He looked at Yang Si, who was gloating, and said with a displeased voice, Okay, Tiger's Mane, don't be angry. I'll do it. Yang Si could see that Tiger's Mane was really unhappy, so he quickly begged for mercy. Then he coughed lightly to attract everyone's attention and said, Everyone, don't be anxious. If something happens, we can discuss and solve it together. The sky won't fall. Commander Yang, the sky won't fall, but we can't stand being provoked like this, and not being able to do anything is really intolerable. Otherwise, how can our new army establish itself in the world? Commander Lu Zhua thought that Yang Si was here to cause trouble, so when he said these words, he was more or less angry. He even vaguely wanted to remind Yang Si that this was their new army's problem and had nothing to do with the logistics division. Chapter 1162. Tiger's Mane also understood the hidden meaning in these words. He immediately glared at Lu Zhua and said, Division Commander Lu, what kind of bullshit are you spouting? Let me tell you, apologize to Division Commander Yang Si immediately. Otherwise I'll dismiss you. This sudden outburst shocked Lu Zhua. Given Tiger's Mane's usual power, Lu Zhua also knew that his qualifications would not be taken seriously by others. He could only cup his hands together and say to Yang Si, Division Commander Yang, I was reckless just now. I'm sorry. But you know I'm not here for you. Okay, I know what's going on. Division Commander Lu, you don't have to explain. I just hope that everyone can listen to me, an outsider of the new army, say a few words, okay? Yang Si smiled nonchalantly. He even intentionally pointed out the fact that he wasn't a member of the new army. Lu Zhua immediately lowered his head with a red face. The others also didn't dare to say anything against it. Not to mention that the logistics division was not only an establishment of a division, but also in charge of all the food and money in the beginning city. Yang Si himself was a servant of Bugnam of Gojoseon and was an extremely close existence. Look at what he called Tiger's Mane. That was a unique title, Tiger Head. Look at what he called Beta Persei, second brother. Who was Beta Persei? He was by Yang Qindong's side all year round. All the military and political affairs were first passed through his hands before they were sent to Bugnam of Gojoseon. If such an important person was offended, it was not something that the people below could bear to let him talk nonsense beside Bugnam of Gojoseon. Considering the importance of Yang Si's identity, everyone had no choice but to calm down. When a pin drop could be heard in the conference room, Yang Si's voice also entered everyone's ears. Everyone, young master has now ended the war with the Japanese Empire and is leading the army to the Liaodong region in order to reopen a supply route to the beginning city. During this period, Ming and Yeshen have joined forces to attack our beginning city first and completely remove the nail of our 5-star army in the grassland. To be honest, this is something that young master absolutely does not want to happen, and we absolutely will not allow it to happen. That's right, nothing can happen to the beginning city. After hearing this, everyone nodded and agreed. Of course, nothing can happen to the beginning city. Yang Si first set the tone, but then he shook his head and said, It's just that the situation is like this. It's not that I want to boost the morale of others and diminish our own prestige. Although our new army is strong enough and we are not afraid of any opponent, this time it's the coalition army of Ming and Yeshen. Among them, Ming sent 200,000 troops and Yeshen sent 120,000 cavalry. How can they be so easy to deal with? And according to reliable news, behind this 320,000 army, there are 30,000 Yeshen cavalry and 100,000 Ming army preparing for war. Once they find an opportunity, they will rush up at any time and tear us apart. Everyone was an important officer in the new army, so they knew a little about how many troops the other party had. However, this was the first time they heard about the 130,000 troops. Because of this, everyone quickly calculated in their hearts how high their chances of winning would be once this force joined the battle. Yang Si saw everyone's reaction and chuckled, "Everyone, think about it. If we really go out of the city and fight with the enemy, then with just us alone, do you think we'll be a match for these 400,000 enemies? When the time comes, even if we use the tactic of taking turns to fight, I'm afraid we will be exhausted to death, right? Therefore, it's absolutely impossible to fight outside the city. The only thing we can do is to fight a defensive battle and let them attack. We can exhaust their strength in the continuous siege and achieve the goal of drawing everyone's military strength closer. We indeed don't have much confidence in fighting outside the city, but if we let them attack while we defend, our chances of winning aren't small. For this matter, Tiger Head and I have already made preparations. Now I can tell everyone everything. For this battle, our logistics division has prepared 70,000 soldiers to defend the city." As soon as his voice fell, everyone in the meeting except for Commander Hu Mang looked very shocked. 70,000 people, that's a lot. No wonder the logistics division was so busy a while ago. It seems like it was because of this matter. That's right. With these 70,000 men and our new army, it's not like we don't have a chance to defend the city. There's a chance for us to fight this battle well. While the officers were still sighing about the 70,000 new soldiers, there were people in the crowd who were thinking about other things. For example, the recon commander, Ding Shan, was willing to use his brain. To be able to become a recon commander, needless to say, one's brain had to be flexible. Only an extremely smart person could do this job well. Because Ding Shan used to dress up as a wealthy merchant and go deep into enemy territory when he was doing reconnaissance, he also knew a lot about economic matters. Seeing that everyone was excited about the 70,000 soldiers guarding the city, Ding Shan was indeed thinking about other things. Since the commander called everyone for a meeting this time, he should say whatever was on his mind. He decided to raise the two questions in his heart. "Commander, Division Commander Yang Si, I have two questions to ask, but I don't know if I can say them." After hesitating for a while, Ding Shan finally decided to open his mouth and ask the questions. "Commander Ding, I've said before that you can say anything in this meeting. If you have any questions, just take them out for everyone to discuss," Tiger Head said. He knew that Ding Shan was worried that talking too much would cause him to be dissatisfied. With Tiger Head's support, Ding Shan became bolder and smoother when he spoke. "Commander, Division Commander Yang Si, I have a total of two questions. First, the sudden appearance of 70,000 soldiers guarding the city is naturally a good thing. However, as far as I know, there is not much food left in the city. If the beginning city is surrounded for a long time, how long can the food last? Second, if Ming and Yeshen give up attacking our beginning city and attack Mo Bay City instead, do we need reinforcements?" He did not say much, but all he said were key words. In an instant, the originally silent meeting room became lively again. All the officers fell into a discussion again. Among them, some said that there was a problem in Mo Bay City and that they needed reinforcements. Their point of view was that it was also a part of the beginning city, so there must not be any problems. Of course, there were also objections. The reason was that even the beginning city was in danger. How could they spare the energy to reinforce others? What if the opponent set a trap outside the city? Wouldn't rushing out like this be exactly what they wanted? As for the problem of food, everyone was smart enough not to talk about it. After all, this matter was managed by the commander and the logistics division. Besides, they really did not have a better way to solve the problem. Hu Mang didn't stop the officers from discussing. Some things were just like that. If there was a problem, it wouldn't be good to suppress it. On the contrary, it was not a big deal to let them vent and talk about the matter. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the discussion became softer and softer. Hu Mang then gave Yang Si a look. Yang Si nodded in understanding. Then he coughed softly and said, "Everyone, I want to say that everyone's worries are unnecessary. Regarding the problem of Mo Bay City, the young master specially sent a telegram. We don't need to care about the matters there. Even if we see the Ming army or Yeshen's cavalry heading there, we don't need to care. This time, what we need to do is to nail the beginning city like a nail and ensure that the city is not lost. Therefore, everyone doesn't need to think about this problem. Instead, we need to discuss the matter of food with everyone." Since Yang Si said that the young master had said so, everyone really did not need to worry. After all, no matter how powerful they were, they could not be more powerful than Yang Qindong. Therefore, after a moment of surprise, everyone's gaze fell on Yang Si again and they continued to listen. Everyone, since last year until now, our beginning city has not had any supplies for 1 year and 4 months. Although last autumn was considered a bumper year, there were still a lot of people who needed to be fed. In addition, the Far Eastern region also needs our food supply, so we did not have a lot of food in stock. Now it's even more difficult. The enemy has surrounded the beginning city. I'm afraid that we won't be able to get this year's supply. As a result, our food can only last for 3 months at most. As Yang Si spoke, he stretched out 3 fingers. Without waiting for everyone to say anything, he continued, "Remember, the 3 months I said refers to the time when there is no war. Once there is a war, I'm afraid that we won't be able to last for 1.5 months. What? I'm afraid it's not possible in such a short period of time." When they heard that there was only 1.5 months of food, the faces of the officers became a little ugly. Everyone knew that when there was no war, there was no need to consume too much physical strength, so the food required would be correspondingly reduced. On the contrary, when there was a war, they would need to maintain enough physical strength. The more they moved, the more they would need to eat. However, everyone did not expect that the food was only enough for 1.5 months. The current Bugnam of Gojoseon had just entered the Liaodong region not long ago. If he wanted to solve the problem there and open a new supply line, it would not be possible in a short period of time. In this way, didn't it mean that the food in the beginning city was already very insufficient? Seeing the changes in the officers' faces, Tiger Ming knew that he had to say something at this moment. He said with a serious face, "I believe everyone has heard Commander Yang Si's words very clearly. That's right, one of our biggest problems now is food. How to save food has become one of our main tasks in the next step. For this reason, the commander announced that from today onwards until there is no war, the food standard of the soldiers will be reduced by 2/3. In other words, the previous 3 meals a day will now be changed to 1 meal a day. Even if there is a war in the future, the army will at most have 2 meals a day. Everyone needs to make this clear to the soldiers in advance and make some mental preparations in advance. Is there any problem?" Chapter 1163. There was not enough food. This was an objective fact. Reducing the food supply had become a must. There was no room for discussion. At this time, everyone knew that. Who would not understand? However, when they thought about how they would have to starve for a period of time, everyone's expressions inevitably turned a little ugly. The meeting continued. Next, everyone put forward various suggestions on how to defend the city. After more than 2 hours, the meeting was dismissed. After sending everyone away, Tiger's Mane looked at Yang Si, the only one who did not leave, and said, "The next period of time will be very difficult. Young Master is also watching us from afar. You must hold on." Tiger's Mane, "Don't worry. As long as we are still here, no one can open the gate to enter the first city." Yang Si also put away his playful appearance and said very seriously, 10 days after this meeting, the attack and defense of the first city officially began. 200,000 Ming army and 120,000 Yesen cavalry appeared from all directions, surrounded the first city, and launched their so-called all-out attack. An all-out attack meant that any point on the battlefield could be the direction of attack in advance. This kind of attack felt like casting a wide net. However, Tiger's Mane was already prepared. Especially with the effect of the mines buried in the ground, they caused a lot of damage to the opponents. It took them 7 days to remove all the mines outside the city and reach the city tower. When the first city was built, it had a large outer city. Now was the time to play a role, especially under the protection of a wide moat. In addition, it was the rainy season, which brought a lot of trouble to the Ming army's attack. The new army relied on these external environmental advantages to stall for time day by day. Until now, more than 20 days had passed since the attack, but they still did not let the Ming army and Yesen cavalry gain any advantage. At this time, Yang Qindong sent a telegram saying that he had pacified nearly 2/3 of the territory in Liaodong. At the same time, he had also opened a new supply line. Now he was on his way to Shur City. However, considering that the mountain was high and the road was long, it would take at least a month to transport the supplies. Hope appeared, but it took some time. Tiger's Mane, Yu Mian, and Yang Si all let out a long sigh of relief when they saw the telegram. "Great, I can finally see hope." Yu Mian chuckled. "That's right. Young Master is indeed Young Master. He solved most of the problems in Liaodong in such a short time. At the same time, he also opened up the supply line." "That's amazing," Yang Si said with a sigh. Only Tiger's Mane did not say anything. When he saw the two of them looking at him, he could not help but say, "But how are we going to survive the next month? Jianghu, to be honest, how many days can our provisions last? This? If we continue to develop like this, I'm afraid we will have nothing in half a month. Tiger's Mane, you know that the soldiers stand on the city tower every day to defend against the enemy. If they don't even have enough to eat, how can they have the strength to fight?" Jianghu, as a logistics officer in charge of money and provisions, actually took the initiative to speak for the army at this moment. From this, it could be seen how limited the food distributed every day was. No, half a month is definitely not enough. You have also read the telegram just now. I'm afraid it will take at least a month for the young master to arrive here. This does not exclude the possibility of other accidents happening. In other words, it may take even longer. When that time comes, we will have an empty army but no food. How are we going to fight this war? So, as if he had made a very heavy decision, Tiger's Mane said aloud, "So the food distribution must be checked. The soldiers who are on the battlefield can only have one meal a day. Those who are not on the battlefield can have one meal every 2 days. Usually we can boil more water for them to drink. At worst we can add some rice and make it into rice soup. It's just a little thinner, that's all." "What? That won't do." When Yu Mian heard this, he was shocked. Although he was not a soldier, he knew that if the soldiers did not keep up with the nutrition, it would greatly affect their performance. "What do you mean by that?" "I am the commander of the new army, the highest-ranking officer here. Since I have said so, then it's settled. I know my soldiers, they will definitely be able to persevere." When Tiger's Mane said this, tears were already welling up in his eyes. This decision was made by him, and he knew very well what the consequences would be. However, if they did not suffer now and tighten their stomachs, once there was not a single grain of food in the city would collapse by itself. Tiger's Mane's attitude was very firm. After Yu Mian and Jianghu looked at each other, they knew that it was useless to say anything now. Both of them expressed their support. Moreover, they promised that the city lord's mansion and the logistics team would start to save food. They would have one meal every 2 days and would mainly drink porridge. The three of them represented the highest administrative organization in the beginning city. Their opinions were unified, and the order was quickly passed down. Naturally, it attracted a lot of complaints. The day's attack and defense battle stopped as the sun set. The soldiers of the 5-star army who had been fighting for the whole day retreated from the city tower. Each of them had a yellow face and their legs were weak. They originally thought that they could have a full meal, but when they saw that there was only a little rice in the clear water waiting for them, and it was not even rice soup, their faces became even uglier. To be able to become a soldier of the 5-star army, the requirements were very strict. They did not want the old, those who were too young, and those who were weak and sickly. This also caused most of them to be young and middle-aged men. These people were naturally stronger, but at the same time they also had a large appetite. The food of the 5-star army had always been good, and it was full of meat and fish. Even so, they could usually eat 2 big bowls of rice for a meal. When there was not enough oil, it was normal to eat 3 or 4 big bowls. However, now they could eat as much as they wanted, but they could not eat until they were full. One could imagine how big the contrast was. Therefore, some soldiers could not help but complain. "If we eat this, how are we going to go up the city tower to fight tomorrow?" "That's right. If we don't have enough food and don't have the strength, how are we going to defend the city?" "That's right, that's right." Someone took the lead and soon more soldiers began to agree. They did not want to cause trouble, but their stomachs rebelled first. "Enough." The battalion commander in charge of leading the army had a very serious expression. "Don't feel indignant for yourselves. The first city has been surrounded for more than a year. It's already good that there is still food to eat. Although you are working hard and even risking your lives, at least you can still drink rice soup. However, look at the people in the city. They have even forgotten what rice soup tastes like. Now there is not even a tree in the city. Do you know why? It's because even the bark has been eaten clean by them." With the battalion commander's roar, the soldiers who were complaining stopped talking. This was because they knew that what the battalion commander said was the truth. Not only were all the trees in the city eaten clean, but the people were also the same. Even the high-ranking officials were the same. It was said that the city lord, Yu Mian, only drank half a bowl of rice soup for 3 days. He usually drank water to allay his hunger. Because of this, he had already fainted once. When the battalion commander saw that the soldiers had stopped talking, he did not continue to reprimand the soldiers. Instead, he said in a sincere tone, "Soldiers, I know that everyone is very hungry. To be honest, I am also hungry. However, I do not complain because I know that it is worth it for us to guard this place. Because of our existence, hundreds of thousands of people in the city can survive. And if we are not here once the Ming army and Yeshin's troops rush into the first city, at that time, not many of our brothers, sisters and family members will be able to survive. And for them, even if I die on the city tower, it will be worth it. It will be glorious. Compared to death, it's just hunger. What's there to be afraid of? The battalion commander's family was in the first city. The reason why he was able to persist until now was more for the sake of his family. After he said this, all the soldiers' complaints disappeared. If there were some of them who still had some opinions in their hearts, but even the officers and the city lord were like this. What else could they say? All right, eat early and rest early. There will be a big battle tomorrow. The deputy battalion commander took the initiative to stand up and smooth things over. A small storm was suppressed just like that. The matter was quickly discovered by the military scouts and reported to the commander, Tiger's Mane. Looking at the report, he sighed and said, "These are our soldiers. What lovely soldiers. With such soldiers, there is no reason why we can't win this battle." Yes, the soldiers are willing to sacrifice their families for the greater good. This spirit is worth learning. The logistics division commander, Yang Si, nodded in agreement. Just learning is not enough. Yang Si, I know you still have some food. Why don't you distribute some? Otherwise, I'm really afraid that the soldiers won't be able to withstand the hunger. As Tiger's Mane spoke, he looked at Yang Si with a yearning gaze. Yang Si was the official in charge of logistics appointed by Yang Qindong. He had so much power that even if he did something wrong, Tiger's Mane did not have the power to punish him at will. With such power, Yang Si did not disappoint Yang Qindong. He managed the logistics in an orderly manner. Especially when it came to money and food, he kept a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Even though there was a severe shortage of food in the city, Yang Si still had a backup plan. He left some food and didn't take it out. For some reason, Tiger's Mane found out about this matter. He wanted to use this food more than once to save the city. Absolutely not. Yang Si knew what Tiger's Mane was talking about. He said in a very decisive and unquestionable tone, "That is the real last life-saving food. It may bring about an extremely important impact and result. It absolutely cannot be used now." Chapter 1164. But, seeing that Yang Si refused again, Tiger's Mane wanted to continue persuading him. "Tiger's Mane, we are brothers, but there are some things that I won't listen to you. This is also young master's idea. Of course, if you can persuade young master to send a telegram, I can let you handle the food." Afraid that the rejection would affect the friendship between the two, Yang Si had no choice but to use Yang Qindong's name. Upon hearing this, Tiger's Mane lowered his head. Since it was the young master's idea, he definitely did not dare to question it. Well, I hope we can hold on until then. As the war continued day by day, the situation of the shortage of food in the city became more and more serious. Just yesterday, there were more than 100 people in the city who fainted because of hunger. Among them, there were more than 10 officials in the city lord's mansion, and city lord Yu Mian was among them. Because Yu Mian lacked exercise all year round, his physical condition was naturally not as good as Tiger's Mane and the others. However, he fainted twice, which was enough to show how critical the situation in the first city was. Outside the first city, a new day of siege had to end with the sunset. In the big tent, Ming's general tent, the generals were sitting there. The theme of the meeting was to analyze the problem of capturing the first city. As the highest commander in the army, Marquis Wu Qingho, the military commander, Shiheng, sat at the head of the table. To his left and right sat the great general of Liaodong Iron Cavalry, Fang Dingshan, primary second-grade general, Sun Hong, primary second-grade general, and commander of Wanshuan's Department of Defense, Shi Wanshan, primary second-grade general, as well as their subordinates. Although they were all second-grade generals, there was still a difference in their ranks. For example, Fang Dingshan was sitting on the first seat on the left. As the commander of the Imperial Guards, he originally had the qualifications to be superior. Many times even Shiheng could not order and command him. Instead, he had to discuss everything with him. Next was Shaanxi Datong Army General Sun Hong. Originally, the Shaanxi commander-in-chief was him, while the Datong commander-in-chief was Shi Wanshan. But because he was a very good flatterer, when he saw how powerful Fang Dingshan was, he immediately leaned over and gave him money, women, and even buying him 2 residences in the capital. Very quickly, on the grounds that the power of the army should be centralized, and on the grounds that Datong was located in Shaanxi, he was given the position of 2 commander-in-chief. Now, he was naturally the third most important person in the Ming army. The last one was Shi Wanshan, who was also a second-grade official. Speaking of which, Shi Wanshan was really unlucky. After following Yang Qindong and picking up some benefits and victories, he was promoted to Datong Commander-in-Chief. However, before he could secure his seat, Sun Hong beat him to it and he returned to his old position of Commander-in-Chief of All Department. Although there was no change in his official rank, his actual authority had decreased by a lot. For this reason, the commanders under him, Ancient River and Chen Shining Wenfeng, had often fought against injustice for him. But with the current situation, what was the point? But even so, Shi Wanshan, as a second-grade general, should have been seated in the fourth position, which was the second seat from the left. But who would have thought that great General Fang Dingshan would place Deputy General Luo Baikuan in this position? So he had no choice but to sit in the second seat from the right, becoming number 5 in the army. If it were a normal person, they would have already lost their cool in the face of such suppression, but Shi Wanshan did not do so. On the contrary, he continued to do what he was supposed to do, making it so that Fang Dingshan could not find a suitable excuse to deal with him. There was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason in this world. The reason for all of this was that when Fang Dingshan first came to the Datong prefecture, he had hinted that Shi Wanshan, who was still a commander-in-chief at the time, wanted money. To be able to become the commander-in-chief of the imperial bodyguards, Fang Dingshan was not only capable, but more importantly, he was willing to give money. He would try his best to make friends with anyone who could talk to the emperor. Naturally, he would spend a lot of money to establish a good relationship with them. But where would he get this money from? Of course, he had to think of a way to get it. Thus, it fell into the hands of generals like Shi Wanshan who held military power. It was true that Shi Wanshan was the commander of the army, but because of his background, he was different from the other generals of the great Ming dynasty. He knew that he had to treat his soldiers well because he knew that this was the only way the soldiers would work hard at crucial times. Therefore, the matter of embezzling the soldiers' pay had never occurred in the army under his command. If he did not embezzle the soldiers' pay and only relied on some gray income, where would he have the extra money to give Fang Dingshan? Furthermore, he had also asked around and found out that this person had a huge appetite. Fang Dingshan wanted at least 70% of the military budget and only left 30% for himself. This kind of person was not someone he could satisfy. Since this was the case, it was better not to give him even once. With the limited amount of money, he could give the officials in the capital some favors and say a few words at crucial times. One demanded money and the other did not give it. This was how the enmity appeared. When everyone saw that Fang Dingshan was very unhappy with Shi Wanshan, even Shi Heng, who was the commander-in-chief of the army, began to distance himself from him. Moreover, in the siege of the city these days, the soldiers of the Datong prefecture had all been used. In the past month, the number of casualties alone had reached 30,000, and there were countless more injured. Because of the lack of provisions, the strength of the 5-star army in the first city was constantly declining. The topic of this meeting was to let the soldiers of the Datong prefecture replace the soldiers of the Datong prefecture. To put it bluntly, seeing that the opportunity to make a great contribution had arrived, they were ready to snatch the credit. At the beginning of the meeting, Commander-in-Chief Shi Heng made the topic public. He even said to Shi Wanshan with an unfriendly expression, "General Shi, after such a long time, even the outer city of the first city has not been taken down. You have an unshirkable responsibility. After my discussion with the other generals, we have decided to let all of you retreat and have a good rest. You can leave everything to Commander Sun Hong. What? We have already made great progress and..." Seeing that someone was going to take advantage of the situation, the commander of the Datong prefecture, Ancient River, who had a bad temper, suddenly stood up and said angrily with a red face, "How dare you? How can you speak here?" Fang Dingshan glanced at Ancient River and then snorted at Shi Wanshan, "General Shi, your men are too unruly. You are not fit to be a general. How can you say that about my..." Ancient River, who was furious, wanted to reprimand him again. However, Shi Wanshan had already stood up and stood in front of him. He bowed to Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan and said, I'm sorry. This bad temper is all because of me. I apologize to both of you on behalf of General Gu. Also, I agree to let the soldiers who are attacking the city retreat for a rest. I also want to thank both of you for your sympathy." One would never slap a smiling person. Shi Wanshan was so humble in front of so many generals. It could be said that he had lost all his face. Since they did not want to be called unreasonable, Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan did not say anything. Instead, they looked at Sun Hong, who was sitting there with a smile, and said, "Commander Sun, I'll leave the rest to you. I hope you can perform well and take down the first city as soon as possible. That would be a great contribution. Don't be like some people who are afraid of death." "Well said, well said. I'll leave the rest to Deputy Commander General Guang. I have something to do and need to return to the Datong Prefecture first," Sun Hong replied with a smile. Everyone was very clear about who this sum referred to. Everyone could not help but look at Shi Wanshan with a trace of coldness. There were even some people who intentionally shifted their positions and distanced themselves from Shi Wanshan and the other two. It was as if whoever was closer to him would be infected and be tainted with bad luck. Shi Wanshan's expression remained the same as usual. It was as if all of this had nothing to do with him. Of course, from his clenched fists, his heart was not as calm and indifferent as he appeared on the surface. After the meeting ended, everyone walked out of the tent in twos and threes. Only Shi Wanshan and the other two were left at the back. There was no other way. Everyone was rushing out of the tent as if they were deliberately provoking them. In this regard, Shi Wanshan suppressed Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng. He waited for everyone to leave the tent before bringing the two of them out. As soon as they came out, they heard Feng Liang's words. "Humph, you're even taking your time to walk. No wonder the soldiers below are all trash." "Who are you talking about?" General Gu He, who had been unable to suppress his anger for a long time, shouted loudly. He lifted his leg and kicked towards the person who spoke. No one thought that Ancient River would actually dare to fight in the main tent. For a moment, all the generals who wanted to leave were stunned. They watched as Ancient River kicked the person who spoke, and then a black shadow flew out. The person who flew out was Datong's Deputy General Guang. He was a soft-footed general who had relied on giving money to Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan to become a secondary rank 2 military officer. It was because he had given money to Guang that Ancient River had humiliated him in public. Now that he finally had a chance to return the favor, how could he be polite? He immediately mocked him. He never thought that Ancient River would be so bold as to attack a fellow general in front of everyone. In the laws of the Great Ming Dynasty, there were strict rules against fighting between generals. In order to prevent internal strife, the heaviest punishment was death. Gu He was also in a fit of anger. He did not consider so much at all. That was why he kicked out. After he kicked out, Shi Wanshan, who was at the side, was shocked. He quickly tried to stop Gu He. At the same time he shouted, "Gu He, you can't do this. It's not worth losing your life for this kind of person." After he kicked out, Ancient River instantly thought of the military rules and regulations. However, considering that he had already attacked, how could he be polite? Since he was going to die no matter what, he wanted to kill to make up for it. He directly rushed towards Guang, who was lying on the ground. Chapter 1165. Seeing that another large foot was about to land on Guang's body, and it was aimed at his face, the other generals who were watching the commotion cried out in alarm. They then retreated one after another, as if they were worried that they would be provoked by the aftermath and get involved in the dispute. Contrary to the crowd, there was a figure that shot out swiftly and used his own body to block Ancient River's foot. Plop. After a muffled sound, the figure pulled Guang and retreated 2 feet away. Ancient River was furious that his first kick had failed. He strode forward, intending to give Guang 2 more kicks. In short, he was determined to kick Guang to death. However, he no longer had the chance because the figure that was protecting Guang had already stepped forward and stood horizontally in front of him. The person who had just arrived was young, but his face was full of heroic spirit. Facing the furious Ancient River, not only did he not back down, but he also threw a punch at the unsuspecting Ancient River's chest, forcing him to take 3 steps back. Taking advantage of this, Shi Wanshan rushed over and hugged the furious Ancient River from behind. When the other generals saw that the matter was about to end, they all pretended to be good people and surrounded Ancient River, causing him to have no chance to attack. What's going on? Just as the generals were in a mess, a mighty voice rang out. It was Shi Heng, who had rushed over after hearing the news. When he saw Shi Heng appear, Guang did not know where he got the strength from, but he immediately stood up from the ground and jogged to Shi Heng's side. "Marquis, you have to make a decision for me. Just now this Ancient River kicked me like a madman. If it wasn't for the fact that my subordinates still had some strength, I'm afraid that I would have been kicked to death." Guang was right. Ancient River wanted to take his life. If it wasn't for the fact that weapons were not allowed in the tent during the political discussion, he would have been killed by now. "Ancient River, how dare you do something like this? Men, lock him up." After Marquis investigates the matter, he will be severely punished. Shiheng said with a serious face. For something like this to happen in the military, it was clear that Marquis did not put him in his eyes at all. It was no wonder that he was so angry. Immediately, a few armored soldiers came over and tied Ancient River up. Then, under the anxious gazes of Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng, he was taken away. Shi Wanshan, who knew that military discipline was like a mountain, knew very well what the consequences would be if this matter was carried out. He immediately ran in front of Shiheng and pleaded, "Marquis, this is all a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. Can you be magnanimous and be lenient?" "What misunderstanding?" "We'll talk about it after the investigation." Shiheng flicked his sleeves and left. He did not give Shi Wanshan much opportunity to speak. On the other side, Tsingguang had a complacent look on his face. He said to the young general who had saved him, "Su Dei, you did well this time. Yes, there is a position for a captain in the military. I think you are very suitable." "Thank you for the promotion, General." Su Dei hurriedly cupped his hands and bowed his head. However, no one noticed that when he bowed his head, a trace of joy flashed through his eyes. This was because no one knew that Su Dei had long been one of Yang Qindong's men. Even now, Yang Qindong still owed him a female soldier from the 5-star Army's publicity team. Therefore, after everyone left, Su Dei took the 50 taels of silver that Tsingguang had rewarded him and went to a newly built restaurant next to the military camp. No one knew that he had secretly met the restaurant owner, who was a secret agent from the Security Bureau. "Please report to the higher-ups that Ancient River's commanding officer is aware that he might be in danger. General Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng will definitely do their best to rescue him." After relaying the message to the restaurant owner, Su Dei, like many other customers who came here, found a seat and ordered a table full of food and wine. Before he finished eating, the secret agent had already told him about the message that Yang Qindong had personally sent to him. He had to increase his efforts to stop Ancient River's actions, but it would be best if he could ensure that Ancient River didn't die. After Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng hurriedly returned to the large tent, the two of them looked at each other with a bitter expression. "General, with Tsingguang's narrow-minded personality and our bad relationship with Shiheng, I'm afraid that General Ancient River's fate will be sealed. Fang Ding might even interfere. If that's the case, I'm afraid he won't be able to keep his life." Ning Wenfeng had always been regarded as a strategist by Shi Wanshan. This analysis also showed the calm side of his personality. "You're right. Ancient River was too impulsive this time. It's too difficult to save him now. It seems that we'll have to spend a lot of money." After sitting down, Shi Wanshan revealed a headache expression. Ancient River absolutely couldn't die. Everyone knew that he did this to stand up for himself. If something really happened to him, how could he still have the face to lead the army? However, the price to pay to save this person was unimaginable. There was only one way, and that was to give him money. Shi Wanshan, who was familiar with Shiheng and Tsingguang, was very clear that in the eyes of these people, there was no problem that couldn't be solved with money. Moreover, Ancient River didn't really kill Tsingguang, so there was still hope for everything. The difficult part was how much money to spend. "Brother Ning, how much money do we have now?" After thinking it over, Shi Wanshan couldn't think of a better way. He could only bleed for money. "General, we just gave 50,000 taels to the officials in the capital a while ago. Right now, we only have less than 10,000 taels." Ning Wenfeng bitterly replied. "Less than 10,000 taels? How can that be?" Shi Wanshan was clearly very dissatisfied with this result. He shook his head as if he had made a great decision. "It doesn't matter. In short, a human life is greater than the heavens. How about this? Use the soldiers' pay." In the past, no matter how difficult the situation was, Shi Wanshan had never touched the interests of the soldiers. But now he really had no way out. He had no choice. "Use the soldiers' pay this." Ning Wenfeng replied with great difficulty. He was very clear that if he really did this, what kind of effect would it bring to the two of them? "What this? Didn't we just lose 30,000 men in battle and 15,000 wounded? Didn't the higher-ups just give us a sum of money as compensation? Let's use this first. At least the soldiers who are still alive will be treated well for a long time. This shouldn't be a big problem." Shi Wanshan seemed to have made some kind of decision as he said this. After saying these words, he silently muttered in his heart, "Brothers, I, Shi Wanshan, won't be the first to offend you. However, it doesn't matter. It won't be long before I find a way to fill this hole. I guarantee that after you bleed, your families won't cry with you." Although Ning Wenfeng didn't quite agree with Shi Wanshan's decision, He also knew that there was no better way. He could only sigh and say, "All right, I hope they won't ask for too much." However, sometimes what one feared would happen. Just when Ning Wenfeng went to find Shi Heng with a glimmer of hope, Shi Heng's nephew, Shi Qing, actually asked for 100,000 taels of silver. He even said that this was already in consideration of Shi Wanshan's recent losses. Otherwise the price would be at least 50% higher. Originally, Shi Heng had a nephew named Shi Biao. However, because he was too greedy, he ruined the plan and was finally dealt with. Now that he had a new nephew, Shi Qing, he still had a big appetite. This made Ning Wenfeng, who only took 50,000 taels of silver, have no choice but to return resentfully. Soon Ning Wenfeng returned to the barracks. He looked at Shi Wanshan with a troubled expression. Then he saw the general's mouth force out a word, "Here." With another 100,000 taels of silver, Ning Wenfeng went to find Shi Qing for the second time. He originally thought that there wouldn't be any problems this time, but unexpectedly, it still didn't work. Shi Qing's expression was not good. "First of all, it's not that we don't keep our word. The Marquis can still help you with 100,000 taels of silver. However, now that Xinguang has made a move, and not only him, but General Fang Dingshan has also come to the Marquis about this matter. Now, unless the two of them can shut up, Ancient River's life will be in danger. After all, no one can swallow the humiliation of beating someone in front of so many comrades." Shi Qing's attitude was good. This made Ning Wenfeng unable to vent his anger even if he wanted to. In the end, he could only go back to the barracks to find Shi Wanshan and tell him what he saw. "General, according to Shi Qing's words, the two of them want the same amount. That's a total of 300,000 taels of silver. If General Sun Hong hadn't left the barracks and returned to the Datong prefecture, I'm afraid he would also ask for it. 300,000 taels of silver? Why don't they just rob us?" Shi Wanshan roared after hearing this. It was no wonder that Shi Wanshan was so angry. According to the salary of the great Ming dynasty, the monthly salary of a second-rank official like him was only 61 stones, which was about 777 taels of silver. Now the Zhu family's bank had to deduct 30% of that. In other words, he only received about 500 taels of silver a month. Even if he added in some gray income, the average monthly income was only 2,000 taels of silver. This was not a small amount at the time. It would take him 4 or 5 years to gather 100,000 taels of silver. Now he needed 300,000 taels of silver. Even if he sold himself, he would not be able to gather that much money. Shaking his head, Shi Wanshan fell into distress. Ancient River got such a result because he stood up for him. He absolutely had to save him. However, with such a large expenditure, it was obvious that not only would the pension not be enough, but the soldiers who were still alive would also be affected. Not only this month, but also next month and the following month's salary would be deducted a lot. He didn't know what kind of consequences this would lead to. If there was any other way, he would definitely not agree, but there was no better way. Chapter 1166. General, are we going to save him or not? Ning Wenfeng cleverly didn't ask if he was going to take it or not, because he was truly worried that he would be rejected. At the same time, he also hoped that he would be rejected. After all, this would affect the morale and quality of life of the entire Wanquan City soldiers. After an unknown amount of time, Shi Wanshan, who was panting heavily, said, "Save him. Take all the silver and go now. If we take too long, I'm afraid that they will increase the price again." After saying this, Shi Wanshan fell back into his chair with a plop. It was clear that he had used up all the strength in his body to say this. "Yeah, I'll do it right away." After letting out a sigh, Ning Wenfeng didn't know whether he should be happy or disappointed, but in the end he still walked away. In less than an hour, Gu He, who had received the silver, was released. As soon as Ancient River returned to the barracks, he knelt in front of Shi Wanshan. "General, my life is yours from now on. Quickly get up. To tell the truth, I don't even know how to face the brothers below." Shi Wanshan helped Ancient River up, his eyes lifeless as he spoke. Faced with this problem, Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng didn't say anything, because they both knew that the time to test them had come. In particular, once the news spread, the morale of the army would be thrown into chaos. They could only hope that this matter wouldn't be known by outsiders and that they could hide it for as long as possible. They could live frugally and slowly make up for it. This was a good idea, but there were some people who wouldn't hide this matter, such as Xinguang. After receiving the 100,000 taels of silver, Xinguang knew how to conduct himself. He gave another 20,000 taels of silver to Shiheng and Fang Dingshan respectively. He was very pleased with the 60,000 taels of silver he received. After leaving the tent, he patted the shoulder of Su Dei who was waiting outside. Not bad, your reminder is correct. If we were a bit later, I'm afraid that Ancient River would have been released and we wouldn't have received any benefits. Ha, thank you for your praise, General. However, don't think that the matter will be settled just because they paid the money. Since they dared to lay a hand on the general, they should be prepared for retaliation. Su Dei spoke as if he was defending Tsingguang against injustice. When Tsingguang heard these words he felt great. Aya, when you become a major in the future, I'll have to call you Little General Su. Alright, you just said that this matter isn't over yet. I don't know what else you have in mind. You should know that once I take the money, I won't be able to find trouble with Ancient River. General, we can't openly make trouble for some people, but we can do it secretly. For example, where did their 300,000 taels of silver come from? They must have touched the soldiers' pay and pensions. If we spread this news, what kind of effect do you think it will have? General, with your talent, you're only a deputy commander-in-chief. Even I feel wronged for you. To put it bluntly, it's not that you don't have the ability, but you lack a suitable position. The position of commander of the capital department is a rank 2 military officer. You see, once he mentioned that he could be promoted, there was no need for Su Dei to remind him. Tsingguang's eyes had already lit up. Ah, not bad, not bad. Little General Su, you're right. I know what to do next. Just like this, Shi Wanshan and the other two who originally wanted to hide this matter from others, never thought that this news would be spread all over the military camp that night. Because of this matter, some major commanders and kiliarchs in the military came looking for them. For a time, the capital department didn't need to fight anymore and everyone was already in a state of panic. Tsingguang only asked someone to spread the news. Early the next morning, he led the soldiers of the Datong prefecture to begin the siege. What he wanted now was to achieve military merits. Once he took down the first city, the emperor would be happy and would definitely reward him based on his merits. At that time, it would be reasonable for him to be promoted. Although the soldiers of the capital department were replaced by the weaker soldiers of the Datong prefecture, the soldiers on the walls of the first city still found it very difficult. All of this was because they didn't have enough food. They couldn't even fill their stomachs. Only 5 days later, the outer city of the first city was finally breached. After taking down the outer city, Tsingguang was naturally very excited. Although in order to achieve military merits he didn't rest much in the past 5 days and the losses of the army were not small, he finally saw results. This was absolutely good news for a person who only wanted to climb up. As for how many ordinary soldiers died because of this, it had nothing to do with him. What was worth mentioning was that the first army to break through the perimeter was the one led by Su Dei as a major. Originally, because Su Dei was in his 20s, he was too young and didn't have enough experience. Many people had opinions about his promotion. Even Shiheng had people complain. However, now that he had obtained such a great military merit, it was equivalent to making the first contribution. Finally, the voices of opposition gradually suppressed. Su Dei's position became more stable. After taking down the outer city, the siege didn't stop. However, in comparison, the inner city was taller and stronger. If they wanted to take it down, they would still have to pay a great price. However, after more than a year of besieging the inner city, Shiheng was still very confident. In order to ensure that the mission could be completed, Shiheng even ordered the 100,000 Ming army that was prepared behind him to be transferred together with the 30,000 cavalrymen under Yes Hen. So far, in the process of attacking the first city, a total of 450,000 soldiers had been invested. If the 100,000 soldiers from the 5-star army were included, the scale of this war was definitely not small. Inma River. Beside the river, there was a large group of cavalrymen passing by. Looking from afar, it was majestic and seemed to be endless. In front of the cavalrymen, there was a bright 5-star flag. Behind the flag, there was a flag with the words Far Eastern Army written on it. Yes, the army that came from afar was the 40,000 cavalrymen led by the Far Eastern Army's commander. Qin Bo received a telegram from Yang Qindong and rushed over. There was only one goal, which was to ensure the absolute safety of North Desert City. North Desert City was the second largest city built by the 5-star army on the grassland after the first city. After a few years of development, it had become quite large and had become a flag on the grassland. For many Mongols, North Desert City was even more intimate because the proportion of Mongols in this city had reached 80%. The first city could not fall. It represented a shopping center and was the most important base for the five-star army to develop here. North Desert City could not fall. This was a huge flag for the Mongols. If there was a problem here, it would be an extremely severe blow to the morale and public opinion of the grassland. In order to ensure the absolute safety of North Desert City, Yang Qindong had sent a telegram to the Far Eastern Army early on. He told them that no matter what, they had to send as much of their main force to the south to ensure that this flag would not fall. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong had sent a telegram to Tiger's Mane and told him to just protect the first city and not care about other places. Military Commander, after passing the Yinma River, we will reach North Desert City in 2 days. Can we let our brothers have a good rest first? The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the Far Eastern Army, Dai Qua, walked at the front of the group as the vanguard. He was responsible for opening the road and building bridges. Fortunately, the track from the grassland area to the Far Eastern region would be completed soon. In fact, there were not many places that they had to work hard to open the road. This time, in order to completely implement Yang Qindong's instructions, Qin Bo only left the 2nd Cavalry Division to continue protecting the Far Eastern region. The other 4 divisions, a total of 40,000 people, were all brought out. He knew that the vanguard of the 1st Cavalry Division was indeed very tired, but considering that they were less than 48 hours away from the target, he still shook his head and said to Dai Qua, Division Commander, tell the soldiers to work hard and try to reach the Sanfeng Mountain on the outskirts of North Desert City as soon as possible. That is our real destination. Bugnam of Gojoseon has prepared enough food for us to let the soldiers have a full meal. Originally, when he heard that they had to continue on their journey, Dai Qua wanted to dissuade them. However, when he heard that there was food waiting for him in front, he immediately said happily, Okay, military commander, I will tell the soldiers the good news. It wasn't that Dai Qua was overjoyed at the sight of delicious food. It was just that the Far East Army hadn't been satisfied with food recently. Although the land was vast and fertile, it was sparsely populated. In addition, the weather conditions were very bad. It was winter for half of the year. In such an environment, it was too difficult to rely on oneself to solve the problem of food and drink in a short period of time. Although a lot of wasteland had been opened up in the Far Eastern region in the past 2 years, and with the material support from the first city, the situation had changed a lot. However, to be self-sufficient, it would take at least 2 years. This was because 1 million foreign people had entered the Liaodong region through various means. Otherwise, it would take a long time to achieve it. Without enough food, the people there had formed a habit that they did not dare to eat until they were full. They were afraid that they would not be able to eat until they were full. Just like when the army went out this time, the money and food they brought was also extremely limited. Most of it was left for the 2nd Cavalry Division. Along the way, even during the march, it was difficult for them to eat until they were full. This made them have a special desire for food. Now that they heard that there was delicious food waiting in front of them, it was no wonder that Dai Qua was so excited and happy. When he told the news to the soldiers in the army, as expected, everyone's enthusiasm was aroused. The speed of their advance was also involuntarily increased by 2 points. Originally, it was scheduled to take 2 days to reach the Three Peaks Mountain. Under the temptation of food, they were forced to advance by half a day. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, it was only noon. From afar, they saw dozens of cavalry coming toward them. This was the rescue team arranged by Xan Honghai, the commander of the Mo Bay Division. When the Mo Bay Division was to be established, no one was willing to go. In the end, he took the initiative to stand up and gain the trust and favor of Yang Qindong. Just like this time in the entire Mo Bay city, only he knew about the Far Eastern Army's problem. Under the guidance of the welcoming team, the 40,000 cavalry entered the Three Peaks Mountain. After they left, a cavalry team of hundreds appeared here. They were responsible for cleaning up the battlefield and cleaning up all the hoofprints. Chapter 1167. Under the Beginning City. 10 days had passed since Tsingguang led the troops to attack the city. In addition to the success of taking down the outer city on the 5th day, there was an extremely fierce battle. Countless lives were lost here, but the inner city of the Beginning City was still unbreakable. They thought that after besieging the city for so long as they attacked, the morale of the other side would definitely collapse. They never thought that it would be so difficult to fight. This made the chief of the Wara Wara Yeshen, who had been a bystander, very dissatisfied. Yes Hen appeared on the outskirts of the beginning city very early and witnessed the whole process of being besieged. In his view, he also came to the same conclusion as Shiheng. That was, after being besieged for so long without the support of money and food, it was inevitable that the city would be taken down. He also did not expect that it would be so difficult to attack the city, and that it would not be taken down for a long time. Time passed day by day and it was almost August. In 2 months, there would be heavy snow here which would be even more disadvantageous for attacking the city. He could not help but feel a little anxious. In the words of the Han people, we can't hang on a tree. We have to find a way to take the initiative to attack. After saying this to the generals, Yes Hen took the initiative to go to the tent of the great Ming dynasty's Marquis Wu Qinghe. He found Shiheng and said that he wanted to lead the troops to attack Imo Bay City. Attack Imo Bay City? Isn't this too hasty? In the tent, Shiheng did not seem to agree with Yeshen's proposal. When he answered this question, there was some hesitation in his expression. We can't wait anymore. There will be heavy snow here in 2 months at most. If that's the case, it will not be conducive to the movement of the army and the attack. Once the weather is cold, we can only wait until spring next year. At that time, who can guarantee that there will be no accidents? Seeing that Shiheng was still so hesitant, Yes Hen was of course very unhappy, and his voice was raised a few degrees. Yes Hen was angry and Shiheng felt a headache coming on. Before coming here, the Daizong Emperor had said more than once that they must maintain a good relationship with the world of Wara. At least, before the 5-star army was dealt with, they must not fall out with them. If the other party made any request, as long as it was not too excessive, they should agree to it. Thinking of this, Shiheng could only lower his voice and ask, "What do you think, Chief Yes Hen?" The idea is very simple. Before the beginning city is taken down, our cavalry is of no use at all. I suggest that we open up another battlefield and go to North Desert City. As for here, I will leave 50,000 grassland cavalrymen. Once the city is breached, they will help Wu Qinghe destroy the escaping enemies. Of course, you also need 50,000 Biming infantry to help me take down Imo Bay City. Yes Hen laid out his plan. Exchanging 50,000 cavalrymen for 50,000 infantrymen, no matter how one looked at it, Yes Hen had to pay a higher price. But he still did it. Naturally, he had his own ideas. First, he left 50,000 cavalrymen. Once the beginning city was breached, these people were enough to grab a lot of benefits. Second, the 50,000 infantrymen of Biming were the vanguard, and the biggest loss would be this infantryman army. Compared to his cavalry guarding the rear, it was a much better deal. Third, if they really could not take down North Desert City, the loss would only be the 50,000 Biming infantry, and he would return safely with the 100,000 cavalrymen. In this way, the strength of the 5-star army would be consumed, and the strength of the Biming army would also be consumed. No matter how one looked at it, he had a big advantage. Yes Hen was able to reach his current position because he was indeed able to see things on his own. Shiheng could be conferred the title of Marquis, become the commander of the army, and be given the power to command the army. He was not a vegetarian. Just a little consideration, Yeshen's plan came into his eyes. But he still made the decision to agree. Not for anything else, but because he had received many imperial edicts from the Daizong Emperor. Now, Biming's real enemy was not Yes Hen of Wara, but the 5-star army. As long as they could get rid of the 5-star army, the other costs could be ignored. This might be the difference between Yang Qindong and the great Ming dynasty's generals. If someone looked for him and wanted to attack the Han people, sacrificing the Han people's interests, then no matter how great the benefits were, he would not hesitate to refuse. Shiheng naturally did not have any sense of national honor. In his opinion, the most important thing was to gain the emperor's trust and attention. As for how many people might die in a battle, what did it have to do with him? His power and wealth were not given to him by the people, but by the emperor. He only needed to be responsible to the emperor. Not long after, Yes Hen walked out of Shiheng's tent with satisfaction. Then he ordered one of his 4 generals he lay to go to the Biming army to ask for people. The target was Commander Shi Wanshan and the others who had just left the battlefield. Before the war, the Biming army had expanded to a scale of 100,000 people. During the siege of Shiqing, they had fought for more than 10 days. 30,000 people had died and more than 15,000 were injured. In other words, the number of soldiers who could still fight was only 55,000. This time, when Yes Hen asked Shiheng for soldiers, he pushed the Biming army out. When he came to the camp of the Biming army and found Shi Wanshan, he told him the purpose of his visit. A teacup was quickly smashed to the ground. Originally, Shi Wanshan wanted to smash the teacup on He Lei's head. However, when he thought that the other party was just following orders, he finally changed the direction of his attack. However, the anger in his heart was not suppressed. He looked at He Lei and said, "General He, I'm afraid you have made a mistake. How about this? Let me go to see the admiral and we can discuss it later." He Lei saw the murderous anger flashing in Shi Wanshan's body. Thinking that this was originally a matter of the Biming army, he naturally did not want to interfere. He immediately nodded and said, "Of course, I just hope that General Shi can be faster." Of course. Men, send General He out." Shi Wanshan forced a smile and said to the bodyguard beside him. After He Lei was sent out by the bodyguard, Shi Wanshan could not help but punch the wooden table in the tent, causing a burst of things to fall to the ground. "Men, invite General Hu and General Ning here." After a while, Gu He and Ning Wenfeng appeared in the big tent. When they saw that Shi Wanshan's eyes were red and his face was full of anger, they were somewhat puzzled. However, after they figured out what had happened, their situation wasn't any better. They were both extremely angry. Especially Gu He, who was so angry that he took out his saber and chopped the table that had fallen to the ground into two halves. Intolerable bullying. This is simply intolerable bullying. While venting the dissatisfaction in his heart, Gu He roared loudly. "Yes, this is too much. General, we can't agree. Otherwise we'll be finished." Ning Wenfeng also changed his calm side. At this moment he was very anxious. Listening to the words of the two generals, Shi Wanshan nodded heavily. "Yes, I'll go and find Commander Shi now. No matter what, we can't treat our brothers like this. This is simply courting death." Mo Beiqing was different from the beginning city. This place had been besieged for more than a year, but Mo Beiqing had never been besieged. Although it might not be as good as before after the supply was cut off, it should not be a problem to be self-sufficient. Mo Beiqing was also a flag in the eyes of the Mongolian people on the grassland. They had spent a lot of effort to build the city. As a place to protect their home, it was abnormally strong. It would be strange if such a city was easy to take down. Basically, it could be concluded that the 50,000 Biming infantrymen's move was equivalent to courting death. Once something happened to these 50,000 people, Shi Wanshan's 100,000 people would only be left with 15,000 wounded and 5,000 soldiers. What was the difference between him and a general without an army? How could a general be called a general without soldiers under his command? At that time, someone could casually find an excuse to take away their position. It was not impossible for them to casually accuse them of something. Even if it was for himself, Shi Wanshan could not let it go this time, not to mention that it involved the lives of 50,000 soldiers. Shi Wanshan left and angrily went to the general tent. This scene had long been discovered by the 5-star Army's secret agents who were disguised as ordinary soldiers. They did not belong to the Security Bureau or the CIA, but they belonged to Su Dei's private forces. After taking Yang Qindong's money, Su Dei had done a lot of big things. For example, he tried his best to bribe some important people around the general. Except for some personal soldiers, he really bribed a lot of people who were responsible for pouring tea, feeding horses, and cooking. Therefore, he knew a lot of very secret things. For example, when Yes Hen went to look for Shiheng, he quickly got the news. After knowing the content, he arranged for people to keep an eye on Shi Wanshan's tent. He had a premonition that an opportunity was coming. Shi Wanshan left quickly, but he came back even faster. He still entered the tent angrily. Although Ning Wenfeng had a bad feeling when he saw him like this, he still held a glimmer of hope and asked, "General, what did Admiral Shi say?" "What else can he say?" This time he personally promised Yes Hen and said that it can't be changed. Shi Wanshan took a big gulp of cold water after sitting down. "Then can you send less brothers even if it's only 20,000? The rest can be transferred from other armies." Although Ning Wenfeng knew that it was not easy to change the situation, he still asked with hope. "No." Shi Wanshan shook his head again. Admiral Shi said that the Datong Prefecture soldiers still have to attack the beginning city. There is really no extra troops to be transferred. Now he can only send us up. Oh, he also said that if Mo Bay City is taken down, our Wanquan Prefecture will have a great merit. At that time he will propose to the Emperor to commend us. Chapter 1168. Take down Mo Bay City? Then what if we don't take it down? Ning Wenfeng decisively grasped the topic and asked. Shi Wanshan didn't answer. However, whether it was Ning Wenfeng or Gu He, they both knew that if they couldn't take down the fort and the 50,000 soldiers lost their lives, then they would have to bear all the responsibility. At that time, not only would they not receive any rewards, they would also be punished or even beheaded. For a moment there was no movement in the tent. Obviously, the three of them knew what was going to happen next. Because of this, they didn't know what to say. Seeing the result of years of hard work being ruined overnight, no one would be in a good mood. Silence couldn't solve the problem, especially at this moment. If they couldn't think of a solution, they would be waiting for someone else to decide their fate. Just as the three of them were racking their brains trying to come up with a better idea, footsteps were heard from outside the tent. Then, a voice that was neither hurried nor slow was heard. "Generals, I am Captain Su Dei. I have something to discuss with the three of you. I wonder if it would be convenient for you." Su Dei? After hearing this, the three of them exchanged glances and shook their heads. Obviously, this name was still somewhat unfamiliar to them. But since there was a visitor, and a major at that, of course, it wouldn't be good to casually reject him. Shi Wanshan's voice came from outside the door. "Since you're here, come in." Su Dei lifted the curtain and entered the tent. After he entered, everything in the tent seemed to return to normal. Shi Wanshan and the other two sat high up. Even the broken wooden table was thrown to the side and piled up like garbage. This scene was seen clearly by Su Dei. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, revealing a smile. When Su Dei entered the tent, Shi Wanshan and the other two also saw him clearly. This was especially true for Ancient River. When he saw Su Dei's appearance, he was certain that it was this person who had protected Tsingguang and prevented him from succeeding. He immediately stood up in anger and said, "You're one of Tsingguang's men? What? Are you here to throw your weight around? Let me tell you, if that's what you think, then get lost immediately. Otherwise I'll kill you." As he spoke, Ancient River placed his right hand on his waist. This wasn't the main tent. Weapons were allowed here. With this, he really had the ability to kill. Ancient River said angrily, but Su Dei did not even look at him. Instead, he said coldly, "What? 300,000 taels isn't enough to make you bleed? If you really want to kill people here, what awaits you will be an irreversible situation. At that time, even your family will suffer and suffer together with you." "You." Choked by Su Dei's words, Ancient River's face flushed red. Speaking of which, the current predicament of the all-encompassing department had a lot to do with his rashness back then. He would not make the same mistake a second time. Ancient River did not speak. Instead, it was Ning Wenfeng's turn to laugh coldly. "What? Was General Su really here to flaunt his prowess? Let me tell you, if that's the case, then get lost as soon as possible. We don't have long to live anyway. If you provoke us, we'll start with you first." What Ning Wenfeng said was correct. If there was no better way, then the all-encompassing capital was about to face a very difficult battle. There was an 80% chance that they would be defeated. When that time came, their fate would be sealed. In the face of Ning Wenfeng's threat, Su Dei took it seriously. He turned to look at the other party and said seriously, "Who said you don't have long to live? There's still a great future waiting for you. It's just that you won't be able to see it." As soon as these words fell, Shi Wanshan and the other two were stunned. It was obvious that they could not understand the meaning of these words. After a few breaths of time, Shi Wanshan was the first to react. He asked tentatively, "What does General Su mean by this? What do you mean by a great future? Do you mean that we'll bow down to Tsingguang like you? If that's the case, of course not. There are some things that I don't need to say. Do you really think that Tsingguang can be happy for long? Or are you unable to see the strength of the 5-star army?" Su Dei did not wait for Shi Wanshan to speak and interrupted him. Then he said something that shocked Shi Wanshan and the other two. After several breaths of silence, Ning Wenfeng broke the silence. "General Su should be one of Tsingguang's people, right? Have you thought about the consequences if these words of yours were to spread?" "Consequences? Let's not talk about whether that good-for-nothing Tsingguang will believe it or not. Based on the three of you, you wouldn't do something that harms others without benefiting yourself. Am I right?" Su Dei, on the other hand, was brimming with confidence. Without waiting for permission, he took a seat and poured himself a cup of tea. It was as if the owner had returned to his own home. Su Dei's words were reasonable. He only had hatred for Tsingguang and the other two. He did not have the slightest bit of affection for them. Of course, he would not spread these words. However, even though they knew this, the three of them still could not make sense of the calm Su Dei. From their point of view, this person appearing here and saying such words was too difficult to understand. However, to be able to become a commander in the army, he was not a nameless person. The three of them were only temporarily stunned by Su Dei's sudden appearance. After a while, they calmed down and thought about it. Ning Wenfeng came to a conclusion. After his expression changed, he asked tentatively, You are not one of Tsingguang's people. You stayed by his side just to find the right opportunity. If that's the case, you should be from another faction. You're the five. That's right. Su Dei also interrupted Ning Wenfeng's words as he directly admitted it. For words like the five-star army, it was best not to say it in the military tent. Some things were better left unsaid. The fact that Su Dei admitted it so readily made Shi Wanshan and the other two turn pale with fright. They did not expect the five-star army to be so powerful, and their infiltration of the military was so powerful. Especially when they thought about how long it had been since the incident happened. Su Dei appeared here in such a timely manner. Did this not mean that there were also spies from the five-star army around them? When they thought of this, Shi Wanshan and the other two could not help but feel cold sweat running down their backs. The enemy was so pervasive. How could such an army be so easy to defeat? Could it be that the siege of the beginning city was also a show that they had directed and acted out? Was it to lure the Ming army and then wipe them out? General Su, what about the beginning city? Ning Wenfeng had gradually adjusted his attitude and looked like he wanted to agree with Su Dei. The incident in the beginning city is true. Su Dei understood what Ning Wenfeng wanted to ask, so he answered decisively, but the important thing was that he added, It's just that the incident in the beginning city is just a temporary emergency. It won't be long before the situation here changes dramatically. If the three generals still stay here, then you have to make a choice. Of course, you cannot believe my words. No, I believe. At this moment, how could Ning Wenfeng not believe it? Right now, he was more concerned about where the bright future that Su Dei had mentioned was located. So he was a little hesitant and asked hesitantly, That? General Su, you just said something about a great future. It's about joining the five-star army. Su Dei's tone was as calm as water, as if he was talking about a very ordinary thing. To be honest, this time, Bugnam of Gojoseon is very angry about Ming's actions. If the emperor is only worried that Bugnam of Gojoseon will send the army to attack because of his achievements, it's normal. However, Bugnam of Gojoseon can't accept the fact that he actually joined forces with the foreign tribes to attack the Han people. Over the years, I'm sure the three generals are very clear about Bugnam of Gojoseon's policies toward the Han people. Understood. This time it was not only Ning Wenfeng but even Gu He, who was beside him, also spoke out in agreement. What a joke. As the army closest to the beginning city, they naturally knew their every move and policy like the back of their hand. They also knew that even under their rule, many Han people wanted to live in the beginning city because it was equivalent to heaven for the Han people. Since you're clear about it, I don't need to explain anything else. It's because you're Han people and Han generals. If you're willing to join Bugnam of Gojoseon, isn't it the great future that I mentioned? Of course you don't have a choice now. You can either listen to Shirhang and be cannon fodder and die, or you can join Bugnam of Gojoseon. At that time, I guarantee that you'll be treated better and have more opportunities to display your strength in the future. Of course you can also choose to hand me over now. However, in this way not only you, but even your families will live in Bugnam of Gojoseon's hatred and vengeance. At that time, I'm afraid that you'll be better off dead. Su Dei had thought about what he would face before he came, but he was not afraid. All of this was because he had Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong behind him. The strength of the backer was also a kind of confidence. With this, Su Dei insisted that as long as one was smart, one should know how to make a choice. Therefore this trip seemed dangerous, but there was still a high chance of success. After Su Dei finished speaking, he sat there and did not make any move to force them. He wanted to give them enough time to consider, because only in this way, they would make the most correct choice, and it would also be the most beneficial choice for the five-star army. The room became silent again. Shi Wanshan and the other two first looked at each other, then Ning Wenfeng gave Su Dei an apologetic look. Then the three of them walked to the side and began to whisper. Chapter 1169. Going to North Mo City is sending ourselves to our deaths. If we don't go, we will be disobeying military orders. Right now, we can only seek refuge with the five-star army. Unexpectedly, the first to speak was the commander Ancient River, who had always been unconvinced by the five-star army. The reason why Ancient River's attitude had changed so much was because everything that had happened so far had left him bitterly disappointed. This time, it was precisely because his own army had been treated unfairly that what he wanted to do the most right now was to make up for everything. Right now, it seemed that joining the five-star army was the only way to solve all the problems. Thus, it was reasonable for him to agree. With Ancient River's attitude, Ning Wenfeng, who had originally been a bit hesitant, also said, "That's right. The five-star army has always treated the Han army very well. For a capable Han general like us, we will definitely be able to play a big role in it. Moreover, everything that Bugnam of Gojoseon has done is very much to my liking. Regardless of whether it is his attitude towards the common people or his policies towards the foreign races, those are things that a true man should do. Joining them, I will not oppose it." Out of the three people, two of them expressed their attitudes. This naturally had to do with the current situation, but it was also greatly related to Yang Qindong's actions that gave them hope. Right now, there was only Commander Shi Wanshan left. It had to be said that Shi Wanshan was originally a bandit. Later on, he gave up the darkness and joined the light. Step by step, he managed to achieve everything he had today. Normally, this kind of experience should make it easier for him to accept the five-star army, but he was the one who considered it the most. It wasn't because of anything else, but because in his eyes, the great Ming dynasty was the most orthodox. All other powers were nothing more than small powers that depended on them. Before long, they would all become like smoke in the wind. Right now, no matter what, he was still a Ming Major Rank 2 general. If he gave up everything and joined the five-star army, and if the five-star army was defeated by Ming one day, where would he go? Could it be that he was going to surrender again? Back then he had surrendered to Ming because it was his goal. Now that he had seen the darkness and ugliness, he would never go back. He also didn't want to become a slave of three surnames like Lu Zhuo in history. He didn't want to betray them, but he didn't know how to deal with the situation before him. However, if he were to ask him to surrender just like that, it wouldn't be to his liking either. As a result, he didn't make a decision on the spot. Instead, he turned around and said to Su Dei, "General Su, this matter is very serious. Can you allow me to think about it before giving you an answer?" Su Dei didn't think that he would be able to convince the other party in a single meeting. As a result, he expressed his understanding and nodded. He took out 300,000 taels of silver and handed it over to Shi Wanshan. "Bugnam of Gojoseon heard about your situation. This is the 300,000 taels of silver that he wanted me to give you. At the very least, it can solve the urgent needs of the army. After all, the soldiers in the army are Han people. Their relatives are also Han people. We can't disappoint the Han people." After saying this, Su Dei swaggered off. He believed that if the other party thought it through, they would definitely take the initiative to look for him. As for what happened today, as long as they weren't stupid, they would definitely tell others about it. After Su Dei left, Shi Wanshan and the other two looked at each other in dismay. Especially when they looked at the 300,000 taels of silver in front of them, they didn't know what to say. The 30,000 Han soldiers who died in the Wanquan division were all killed in the battle with the five-star army when they attacked the beginning city. For this reason, the five-star army also paid a certain price. Now, the relatives of these enemies actually needed to be comforted by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Just based on this, the three of them felt a burning sensation on their faces. I really don't know what to say." Shi Wanshan's face was red as he held it in for a long time before he finally said this sentence. Yes, Bugnam of Gojoseon is very broad-minded, especially his deep feelings for the Han people. It's not something we can imagine. With this kind of behavior, I'm willing to follow him." Ning Wenfeng said with a serious expression. This was equivalent to expressing his stance. Ancient River already had this idea before. After seeing Su Dei's behavior, how could he hesitate? He immediately said, "I also agree." Only Shi Wanshan was left among the three of them. One could see that his face was alternating between red and white. It was obvious that he was struggling in his heart. Now that both of his brothers had agreed, if he were to oppose, then he wouldn't have anyone to help him in the future. When he thought about everything that had happened since he met the five-star army until now, his heart began to tilt. However, it didn't mean that he didn't have any worries. "Both of you, have you really decided to do this? Eunuch Deng Chang has treated us well." As the eunuch of the Wanquan capital, Deng Chang was originally sent by the emperor to monitor Shi Wanshan and the others. However, because he knew how to conduct himself, everyone's relationship with each other was very good. This was very rare in the great Ming dynasty's army. Shi Wanshan was a very loyal person. Now that Deng Chang was mentioned, it was reasonable. This was because once they all surrendered to the five-star army, Deng Chang's responsibility would be great. It wasn't impossible that he would be beheaded because of this. When Deng Chang was mentioned, Ancient River's expression changed. Obviously, he also thought that his actions might bring some bad consequences to the other party. However, Ning Wenfeng wasn't worried. Instead, he chuckled and said, "What's so difficult about this? Can't we just take eunuch Deng with us? Right now he's in the Wanquan capital. Our family members are also there. Since we have to think of a way to take them away, why would we need to take one more person?" Not bad, not bad. This time, Shi Wanshan and Ancient River both nodded in agreement. After resolving the last doubt in their hearts, the three of them put away the 300,000 taels of silver and sat together to discuss the matter of joining the five-star army. Previously, the new second army was besieged and forced to submit to Ming. Although they didn't know whether this matter was true or not, Yang Qindong's character had always been one that didn't offend others if they didn't offend him first. Since someone made a move against him first, he would definitely retaliate. This time, being able to take down Shi Wanshan and his 30,000 troops was a very obvious revenge. And all of this was thanks to the actions of Shi Heng, Sun Guang and the others. Otherwise, if they wanted to achieve their goal, who knew how much time and price they would have to pay? After Shi Wanshan and the others made their decision, Ning Wenfeng took the initiative to find Su Dei. The two of them discussed for half the night and made two important decisions. First, the five-star army would take the letter written by Shi Wanshan and the others to the Wanquan capital. The families of the three generals, the families of the main generals, and Deng Chang would be taken out of the city and brought to a safe place in the grasslands. Second, due to the strength of the Ming army and the Wala army outside the city, the location of the battle would be changed to outside Mo Bay city. At that time, the Mo Bay division would come to their aid. Although only 2 points were discussed, 1, it could solve the worries of the rear. 2, there was a way to perform meritorious deeds. It could be considered perfect. After waiting for Ning Wenfeng to return to the tent and explain the plan, early the next morning Shi Wanshan appeared in the tent of Yes Hen, the leader of the Wara army. Yes Hen had just returned from a morning exercise when he heard the guards say that Shi Wanshan had come. He laughed and walked back to the tent. Knowing the purpose of Shi Wanshan's visit, Yes Hen of course had to be more enthusiastic. After all, whether or not they could take down the solid walls of the Mo Bay division was difficult for their cavalry. In the end, they still needed the Ming infantry. This was a stepping stone for him to perform meritorious deeds. The other party was also risking their lives. It was not too much to be enthusiastic. In the tent, Yes Hen warmly received the two sides could be said to have a good chat. When Shi Wanshan proposed that this time, not only did he have to bring 50,000 Ming infantry, he also had to bring the remaining 5,000 soldiers and 15,000 wounded soldiers. He said that this was the only way to ensure their determination. Yes Hen was naturally happy to accept. Not only that, Yes Hen also affirmed the determination of Shi Wanshan and the five-star army to fight to the death. At the same time, he also promised that once Mo Bay division was taken down, they would be credited with the most meritorious deed. He also promised that in the process, the Wara army would bear the cost of food. Seeing that Yes Hen had dispelled all his worries, Shi Wanshan naturally thanked him. In the end, they agreed to send out the troops 2 days later. He then walked out of the Wala camp. Seeing Shi Wanshan leave the tent, Yes Hen stopped smiling and began to calculate his own plan. Regarding what had happened in the northern Ming army as an ally, they were naturally very clear about it since their camps were not far from each other. He did not believe that Shi Wanshan wanted to bring everyone along just to express his determination to fight to the death. However, at the same time, he did not think that Shi Wanshan would surrender to the five-star army. In his opinion, it was because Shi Wanshan was worried that some people would target the soldiers he left behind after he left. That was why he had no choice but to make such a decision. Even when Shi Wanshan took the initiative to send out the troops 2 days later, Yes Hen also thought that he was afraid of being schemed against by the Ming army and had to leave in a hurry. It was because of this that when Shi Wanshan left the Ming army camp with 70,000 soldiers, no one raised any doubts. On the contrary, everyone looked at them with pity and pity. The only pity was that the one leading the troops in Wara wasn't their leader, Yes Hen, but one of his 4 generals, He Lei. Yeshen's status and power today was inseparable from the 4 generals under his command. They were Teng Shu, He Lei, Mu Tuer, and Bo Muir. Teng Shu and Mu Tuer were killed by Yang Qindong in the battle against the five-star army. Bo Muir had been leading the troops to stay in the Hanoi area. This was also the last path that Yes Hen had prepared for himself. Other than these 3, the only one he could feel at ease leading the troops alone was He Lei. Chapter 1170. He led 100,000 Wala cavalry and Sherwanshan's 70,000 infantrymen towards the North Desert City in the northwest direction of the first city. More than 100,000 men and horses were moving in a grandiose manner. It was a magnificent sight. However, all of this was not what He lay, the leading general, wanted to see. As cavalry, their advantage was that they were fast enough. When they charged, they could borrow the strength of their horses to increase their strength. But now, they were carrying 70,000 Ming infantrymen, especially 15,000 of them were wounded. Although these people were not seriously injured, their speed was too slow because of their injuries. They had already walked for 5 days, but they had only walked less than 100 miles. Moreover, they did not bring a lot of provisions. If they continued at this speed, they would not be able to reach Mo Bay City before they ran out of food. After hearing the situation of the army from the ration officer below, He looked for Sherwanshan with a dark face and said with an unhappy face, "General Sher, your speed is too slow. The provisions we brought are too little. This is not like what you and our leader said, that we can march 50 miles a day." Facing He lay's dissatisfied questioning, Sherwanshan said with a bitter face, "General I don't want to, but as you can see we are only infantrymen. We don't have horses and there are so many wounded people. We really can't walk fast. Why don't you leave some provisions and go first?" This. He listened to Sherwanshan's words and his eyes turned quickly. At the current speed, it was absolutely impossible to go to Mo Bay City and launch a surprise attack. Even the provisions would become the biggest hindrance to the army. And if they could leave these infantrymen here, maybe they could really use a surprise attack to attack Mo Bay City. And if they only left a small amount of provisions, then these Ming infantrymen would have to move faster. Even if it couldn't be used as a surprise attack, it could still speed up the march of the troops. He quickly came up with an idea. He pretended to be reluctant and said, "All right, if that's the case, then this general will leave us some rations and go first. However, you have to be quick. Otherwise, if you are surrounded by the 5-star army, it will be really dangerous." He pretended to be concerned about Sherwanshan and said such words. He left behind a part of the provisions for Sherwanshan, and at the same time he left behind 5,000 cavalrymen. These soldiers weren't really there to protect them, but to prevent Ming's infantry from escaping if the situation turned bad. He who thought that he had arranged everything well, led 950,000 Wala cavalry straight to North Desert City. However, he did not know that this step was equivalent to stepping into the gates of hell, and defeat was already set in stone. Jianghu City. In the courtyard of the former New Second Army's military headquarters, Shibei was sleeping on a wooden chair in the courtyard. Since announcing his departure from the 5-star army and joining Ming, Commander Shibei had been drinking wine for food. Every day he would get drunk. Most of the time he would be carried to bed by his butler and bodyguards. The smell of alcohol on his body would never dissipate. In the first few days, Su Yuan would still have time to comfort him. He even brought Rong Xiao with him. He wanted to persuade Shibei to get back on his feet and work for the Ming army. But when he smelled the smell of alcohol, this idea became fainter and fainter. Until now, no one cared about him. It was as if he was leaving them to their own devices. Seeing that he was willing to live his life in a drunken stupor rather than serve the northern Ming army, Rong Xiaoxing had the thought of killing him. However, Su Yuan stopped him. In his words, Shibei could not die now. The new Second Army still had 3 divisions that were not completely in their hands. If something happened to Shibei now, it would lead to a mutiny. The consequences would be unimaginable. Now they could only wait for Shibei to wake up, or die naturally from drinking. Regarding this, Rong Xiao naturally had a face full of displeasure. But during this period of time, he also learned that Shibei was a person who loved his soldiers as if they were his children. In the new Second Army, there had never been a case of embezzling provisions or soldiers' pay. So, many soldiers had deep feelings for this commander. If Bei really killed him, he was afraid that he would not be able to clean up this mess. So he gave up. At first, Rong Xiao and Su Yuan arranged for people to keep an eye on Shibei to prevent him from doing anything. But as the days went by, especially the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, they were forced to hand over their horses. After they changed from cavalry to infantry, their surveillance and supervision of Shibei became very lax. In the afternoon of this day, Shibei was still drunk as he collapsed on the wooden chair. When the housekeeper came in with 4 soldiers and saw him like this, he could not help but sigh. "Come, carry the general to his room to rest." Shibei was carried out of the courtyard as usual. The 4 Ming army soldiers in charge of surveillance saw this scene clearly from a big tree outside the courtyard. Then they leaned against the tree trunk and dozed off. At first they would follow him to take a look, but every time he would get drunk and not wake up. Sometimes he would even vomit everywhere, causing them to retch as well. Thus they gave up on the idea of following him. In their opinion, this was just a repeat of yesterday's story. There was nothing interesting about a drunkard. As usual, they left after Shi Bei was carried to the big bed in the inner courtyard. But unlike before, the housekeeper did not leave this time. Instead, he gently patted Shi Bei's thigh 3 times and said, "Master, no one followed you. It's very safe now." She, who had been unconscious and drunk just a moment ago, suddenly opened her eyes. There was no sign of drunkenness in her clear eyes. Without needing anyone to help him, Shi Bei straightened his body and said to the housekeeper, "Is he here?" "Yes, he's in the basement. Master, feel free to go. I'll hide here. Even if someone comes, they won't notice anything unless they're close." The housekeeper nodded. Then, without waiting for Shi Bei to say anything, he was already lying on the bed. Then he poured a jar of wine on his body. Immediately, the smell of wine filled the air and could be clearly smelled from 2 feet away. Looking at all of this, Shi Bei nodded in satisfaction. Then he gently moved the bedside table, revealing a passageway that could fit 1 person. Then his figure disappeared. There was a very secret basement in the general's residence. This was a highly confidential matter. Other than the housekeeper, even a former confidant like Su Yuan did not know about it. After Shi Bei entered the basement, he saw a candlelight lit inside. A figure was sitting at the table and reading a book. As if hearing the movement, the person began to turn around. Then, his face was completely revealed in front of Shi Bei. After seeing the person's identity, Shi Bei's eyes were filled with joy. Even his footsteps could not help but quicken. At the same time, he stretched out his hands. "Director Feng, why did you come here personally?" The Director Feng that Shi Bei mentioned was the director of the security bureau in Shi City, Feng Liang. As they used to work in Shi City, the two of them were familiar with each other. 2 days ago, the housekeeper told him that a person who claimed to be from the other side had entered the residence as a vegetable seller. However, there had been no suitable opportunity, so Shi Bei asked the housekeeper to arrange for the person to be in the basement. Today he finally had the chance to meet the person while the enemy was relaxed. He only knew that the person who came from the other side was not clear about the specific identity. He did not expect that the person who came was actually Feng Liang. How could Shi Bei not be excited? After so many days he finally saw one of his own. "He, Commander Shi, you've been wronged." As soon as he saw Shi Bei, Feng Liang chuckled. At the same time he stretched out his hands to welcome Shi Bei. Just like that, 4 big hands were held tightly together. From their eyes, it could be seen that they were very excited. Feng Liang only said, "You've worked hard," which was enough to explain everything. It meant that they were very clear about Shi Bei's fake surrender, which saved a lot of effort. Thank you for your trust in me, 6th young master. However, I've already written a letter of surrender and it has been announced by Rong Xiao and the others." Could it be that the 6th young master? Shi Bei was very touched that Feng Liang still trusted him. However, his heart was not completely at ease. After all, if it were him, it would be impossible to say that he did not have a knot in his heart. Looking at Shi Bei's nervous expression, Feng Liang chuckled and said, "As expected, the 6th young master guessed correctly. He said in the telegram that as long as you say a few words to Shi Bei, he will understand. Do you want to listen to it now?" "Yes." Shi Bei nodded hurriedly. After he publicly surrendered to Ming, the radio station was confiscated by Su Yuan. Shi Bei dared to do this because he knew that the other party would not use it at all. As long as he did not hand over the telegram interpreter, no matter how smart the other party was, they would not be able to understand the principle behind it. Because of this, he had not received any news from Yang Qindong for a long time. "Okay, then I'll recite it to you, Commander Shi Bei." The 6th young master said, "Don't doubt the people you use and don't use the people you doubt. This is a kind of helplessness. Don't doubt the people you use and use the people you doubt. This is a kind of state. The biggest challenge and breakthrough for a leader is to use people, and the biggest breakthrough for using people is to trust people. Please give these 2 words to Shi Bei. Go back and experience it." Imitating Yang Qindong's tone, Feng Liang Bei slowly recited it and seriously listened to Shi Bei's words. Even when there was no sound in the basement, he was still immersed in the aftertaste. With his intelligence, even though he could not completely understand the meaning behind these 2 words, he had already learned a lot from the literal understanding. At least the 6th young master still trusted him. "Thank you." Thank you, sixth young master, for still trusting me. But I don't know what I should do next. During this period of time, he had been pretending to drink wine every day, but he was also afraid of arousing suspicion, so he knew nothing about what was going on outside. However, he believed that since Feng Liang had taken the initiative to look for him, the environment and situation must have changed. Next, it should be time for him to be useful. Chapter 1171. There is indeed something that needs you to do. The sixth young master said that regardless of whether the surrender of Ming is true or not, at least the outside world believes it. If you want to change people's impression of you, there are some things that you have to do. How about this? I'll talk to you about the situation outside. For the rest of the time, Feng Liang talked non-stop. From time to time he would interject a few words, and from time to time he would listen attentively. The two of them met for more than 4 hours. If it weren't for the butler lying on the bed pretending to be asleep and the fact that he usually pretended to be too good, the matter of him waking up would have been exposed. Beginning city. The attack was still going on. Moreover, with Tsingguang's continuous orders, the attack became stronger and stronger. Tsingguang would not love the soldiers as much as Shi Wanshan. In his eyes, these soldiers at the bottom were stepping stones to his glory. In order to achieve his goal, he would not care about the life and death of those people. After Tsingguang sent out a total of 5,000 people as the inspection team, the northern Ming Empire's infantrymen under his command risked their lives and charged towards the inner city gate. Then wave after wave of them rushed to their deaths, as if they wanted to open up a gap and rush into the city. In the city the pressure was increasing. As the enemy's attack became more and more ferocious, the provisions in the city began to run out. Now, not only did the ordinary soldiers have no food to eat, but even the soldiers guarding the city could not eat a full meal. The situation was getting more and more critical day by day. As the stabilizing force of the beginning city, the new army commander, Tiger's Mane, was so thin that he was almost out of shape. His eyes were deeply sunken in. Compared to the others, not only was he hungry, but he was also under great psychological pressure. Before Yang Qindong left, he handed over the military and political power of the beginning city to him. Usually he gave him so much support and trust. If he could not defend the beginning city, how could he still have the face to meet others? Commander, the Ming army's attack is too fierce. Now, our soldiers are losing a lot of people. Most of them are hungry. The original 70,000 infantry soldiers are now less than 10,000 people. Even they can't hold on. Tomorrow at most, no. After tonight, I'm afraid they won't be able to hold on. Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, who was temporarily in charge of the defense of the city, was reporting the current military situation to Tiger's Mane in the 1st Army headquarters in the city. Can it only last for tonight? A hint of sadness flashed across Hu Meng's face. He now had tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry, but because of the lack of food they could not form enough combat power. If this continued, even if the number of troops was large, it would be useless. Yes, if the northern Ming army continues to attack tonight, I'm afraid that by tomorrow morning, we won't be able to hold on. Lu Zhua's eyes were filled with helplessness as he spoke. Since the Ming army changed its commander, Tsingguang had adopted a 24-hour non-stop attack method. This also doubled the pressure on the defenders of the beginning city. Young master, where is the young master? He did not ask about the situation of Lu Zhua's army, nor did he cheer him up. Without food it was useless to say more. Well, the telegraph operator has sent a telegram, but he still can't be contacted. Lu Zhua lowered his head and said. He can't be contacted? How is this possible? Didn't the young master leave the Liaodong region long ago and come here? How can he not be contacted? Someone go and find Division Commander Yang Si. This result was obviously not what Tiger's Mane wanted to hear. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, he thought of Yang Si, the person who was personally appointed by the young master to manage the money and food. He did not believe that at this time the other party would not leave any room for maneuver. The soldier agreed and walked out, but before he could leave the hospital, he saw Division Commander Yang Si had already stepped into the courtyard leisurely. Division Commander Yang Si, our military commander is looking for you. You should go quickly. When he saw Yang Si, it was as if he had seen a relative, and the soldier said anxiously. What's wrong? Is Tiger Head anxious? Haha, when encountering a big matter you have to be calm. Calm down. With a smile on his face, Yang Si said as he strode into the main hall. Yang Si appeared in front of him so quickly with a smile, which made Tiger's Mane very angry. Yangtze, you can still smile at this time. How can you be so heartless? Do you know that once the beginning city is breached, you also have a lot of responsibility? The beginning city will be breached? Don't joke around. This place is guarded by our most powerful division commander Tiger's Mane. No one can attack it. Yang Si said with a playful expression and flattered with a smile. If Yang Si said this in the past, Tiger's Mane would definitely laugh and scold him. Everyone would just treat it as a joke and let it go. But now Yang Si still had such an attitude. Tiger's Mane was furious on the spot. Yang Si, be serious. I can tell you that this is the new military headquarters. No one is joking with you. Tiger's Mane's face was red as he scolded angrily. Yang Si could also see that the other party was anxious. He immediately returned to normal and said, Tiger's Mane, don't be anxious. I just received a telegram from the young master. How can I not be anxious? Wait, what did you just say? You received a telegram from the young master? Tiger's Mane, who was about to get angry, was suddenly stunned. Then he stared at Yang Si with wide eyes as if he wanted to eat him. It was as if he was afraid that Yang Si was joking with him. Yang Si also knew when to joke and when to be extremely serious, so he nodded heavily. Yes, I received a telegram from the young master. The young master is on his way to the beginning city. He already knows about our situation, so he ordered me to take out food to solve the problem at hand first. Everything else can be settled in half a month. Half a month? Take out food? You still have food? Tiger's Mane was extremely surprised when he heard this. His eyes were filled with endless expectations when he looked at Yang Si. Of course I do, but it's only enough for the army and the civilians to eat for half a month. This is also the reason why I haven't taken it out before, Yang Si said seriously. At the same time, he gave an explanation for not taking out food. Originally, Tiger's Mane wanted to scold Yang Si for not taking out food when he had it. However, when he heard it now, he knew that this question was unnecessary. No wonder compared to others, Yang Si always looked unhurried. It seemed that he had the confidence to do so. Thinking of this, Tiger's Mane could not help but ask, You're telling me this because you know that the defending army can't hold on any longer, right? If we can hold on, will you still not tell me? Yes. Yang Si did not deny it. Although he was confident and seemed to be more unhurried than anyone else, he was always paying attention to the situation of the battle. He also knew that the 5-star army without food was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, he quickly sent a telegram to Yang Qindong to ask for instructions. After receiving a definite reply, he went to the new army headquarters. After making the promise, Yang Si saw that Tiger's Mane's face was a little ugly. Although he was under Yang Qindong's instructions this time, he did not want to affect the relationship between the two. Therefore he explained, Tiger's Mane, don't be angry with me. This is all young master's idea. Long before the last time he left the city, he secretly dug a large cellar in the Yang residence with Long Wei. You also know that the quality of the soil here is quite good. Many of the vegetables and grains are stored here to be preserved. This is young master's preparation for a rainy day. So, young master already predicted that this day would come? Tiger's Mane stood up in surprise. That should be the case. Actually, I only found out about it not long ago. It was the young master who told me in a secret message. Now that I think about it, if this matter was really announced earlier, then we would at most be able to eat for a few more days. If we want to cooperate with the young master to launch an all-out counterattack, we won't have the strength to do so. Yang Si nodded and said. Tiger's Mane did not hear the other words clearly, but the words, all-out counterattack, clearly entered his ears. This made him instantly energized. Wait, you're saying that we have to cooperate with the young master to launch an all-out counterattack? Yes, that's what the young master said in the telegram. He also asked me to take out all the food in the cellar and distribute it to the soldiers and the people so that everyone can gradually recover their strength and be ready to go out of the city to counterattack at any time. Yang Si nodded heavily, then took out a telegram that he had just received from his arms and placed it in front of Tiger's Mane's desk. As for the siege army outside the city, they had no idea what was going on inside the city. Since the first city was surrounded, no one could walk out of the city and no one could walk in from outside the city. The news was completely cut off. At dusk, Tsingguang was mobilizing the soldiers. Although he was greedy, he still had some ability to fight. He had keenly felt that the 5-star army guarding the city was an arrow at the end of its flight. He decided to launch another wave of fierce attacks to break through the tower and enter the first city. Not only did Tsingguang mobilize the soldiers below, but he also reported his speculation to Admiral Shi Heng and the others at the same time. After hearing that the first city was about to be breached, Shi Heng separately called for Fang Dingshan and Yes Hen and asked their cavalry to prepare to open the city gate and charge into the city. Both of you, the first city is a flag of Bugnam of Gojoseon in the grassland. According to our previous investigation, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the city. The army in the city is also the best of the best. Once the city gate is breached, they won't be captured without putting up a fight. At that time we'll have to see how powerful your cavalry is. Shi Heng's gaze kept moving between the two of them. Please don't worry, Admiral. With the Liaodong cavalry here, we won't let any enemy escape. Fang Dingshan patted his chest and promised. Yes, our Walla cavalry wants to have a good fight with the elites of the 5-star army. Yes Hen said with a slightly arrogant expression. Chapter 1172. In the past, when he fought against the 5-star army, when had he ever had the upper hand? Now he could finally pick on a soft persimmon. He had heard that there was no more food in the city, and the soldiers were all skin and bones from hunger. How could such an army have any fighting strength? If he didn't bully such an opponent, who would? The two cavalry generals were so confident. When Shi Heng heard this, he naturally laughed out loud in joy. Good, since it's like this, Marquis can rest assured. Then let's wait for General Guang's good news. Guang was under a lot of pressure before. He was afraid that the Walla army would turn against him after the victory, so General Sun Hong was ordered to return to Shaanxi to set up defenses. Now that he had the authority to command the troops, he felt both glory and pressure. Fortunately, the 5-star army in the city was not strong enough, which gave him new hope. Seeing that victory was right in front of him, and this was going to be a great achievement, Guang did not feel sleepy at all. His eyes were shining and he was very excited. Unfortunately, the battle didn't end as quickly as he had imagined. At dawn, the 5-star army in the city actually counterattacked and forced the Ming soldiers who had taken down the city walls with great difficulty back down. Guang was naturally enraged when he saw such an outcome. He immediately gave the order to continue attacking. No matter what, the 5-star army in the city didn't have any food. If he didn't use this opportunity to defeat them, he probably wouldn't have another chance in the future. When Shi Heng, who didn't receive any good news the entire night, sent someone to ask what was going on, he used the excuse that it was the 5-star army's final radiance of the setting sun as an excuse. However, he had a bad feeling in his heart. Even the result that he thought would be a sure win had an accident. Could it be that the 5-star army in the city had other tricks up their sleeves? If that was the case, why did he appear so weak and powerless a while ago? Guang couldn't think of it, and neither could most of the others. However, there were some who knew, such as Su Dei, who had been promoted to a major and was trusted by Guang. Just last night, when all the siege troops were excitedly waiting for the news of the opening of the city gate, he took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him to secretly meet the Yangxie Security Bureau personnel. The subordinate sent by Director Feng Liang gave a brief summary of the tasks that Su Dei had to complete. General Su, you've done a good job in dealing with Shi Wanshan and the others. Bugnam of Gojoseon is very happy, but he hopes that you can stop being arrogant and make new contributions. When the day comes that you return, Bugnam of Gojoseon will personally celebrate with you. Hearing that Yang Qindong valued him so much, Su Dei was very excited. Please tell Bugnam of Gojoseon that I will do my best and will not let him down. The spy left and Su Dei began to seriously think about how to complete the latest task. He thought about what the spy said about instigating the relationship between Ming and the Walla army. He fell into deep thought. Bay City. He led the cavalry day and night in order to launch a surprise attack. When they were about 10 miles away from the city, the scouts sent out from the front brought back good news. The 4 gates of Bay City were wide open, and there was no defense at all. The scouts even saw people walking back and forth at the city gate as usual. To be able to become one of the 4 generals, He was not only very brave but also very smart. When he fought, he was not only brave but also cautious. Even though the scout had reported, he was still a little worried. He arranged for the cavalry to enter the city and contact the Wara spies in the city to make sure that there was no ambush in Bay City. The scout dismounted and changed into the clothes of the Mongolian people. He then walked towards the gate. He saw all of this and his eyes flashed with excitement. He only had to wait for the scout to say that there was no problem in the city and set off a fire as a signal. He would then lead the cavalry into the city with full force. Then the great achievement would be in front of him. Under He Lei's watchful eyes, the scouts successfully entered the city and disappeared from the city gate. About an hour later, a thick smoke rose from the city. This was the signal that they had discussed before. "Ah, it's done. Come, let's charge together. Victory is in front of us." He Lei excitedly jumped onto his warhorse and shouted to his subordinates. Then nearly 100,000 cavalrymen let out an earth-shattering roar, and began to appear from the forest 3 miles away, launching a fierce attack towards the east gate of Mo Bay. With the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground, the east gate of Mo Bay City was already in a panic. The soldiers guarding the gate were quickly closing the gate. The people who had set up stalls at the gate were running in panic. They did not even have time to clean up the things on the ground. "Ah, go, go, go." He Lei's eyes were filled with excitement. He did not expect that this sneak attack would be so successful. Mo Bay City did not even have the slightest bit of defense. This was a great opportunity given to him by God. He must seize it. He Lei's movements were very fast. Under his constant urging, nearly 100,000 Walla cavalry rushed forward like a gust of wind. From afar it looked like a black tornado. No one dared to look directly at it. As the horses galloped, they were getting closer and closer to the east gate of Mo Bay City. 2 miles, 1 mile, when the patterns on the walls of the gate were clearly visible to the naked eye, even the gate that was closing was only 1/6 of the way closed. The terrified eyes of the 5-star army soldiers were infinitely magnified. All of the Walla cavalry were shouting excitedly. They seemed to see countless money, women, and power waving at them. Everything was beautiful in front of them. As long as they rushed through the gate that was not closed, everything would be theirs. Without any defense, once they entered the city, no one would be a match for nearly 100,000 cavalrymen. At that time, even if the 5-star army gathered together, they would not have the ability to turn the situation around. When that time came, they would be able to defeat them one by one. Many of the Walla cavalry had a joyful expression on their faces. They were shouting all kinds of things and waving the sabers in their hands nonstop. They were as fast as flying. They came from afar to take the victory that was about to be in their hands. Plop, 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 plop. Just when the situation seemed to be settled, an unexpected scene occurred. A huge pit appeared in front of them. The pit was more than 100 feet long and several feet deep. It was like a beast that devoured people's hearts. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed the unprepared Walla cavalry into its mouth. They fell into the huge pit. The sudden scene caught the Walla cavalry off guard. In just one move, at least 1,000 cavalrymen fell into the pit and could not climb back up. However, the Walla cavalry was a branch of the Mongolian cavalry and was one of the strongest. They grew up on horseback and were known as the people who lived on horseback. To be able to join the Walla cavalry, it was not an exaggeration to say that they were all elites. Seeing the sudden change, many cavalrymen used their superb riding skills to force their warhorses to stop. Unfortunately, there were too many cavalrymen. Seeing that a great achievement was in front of them, everyone wanted to do something. There was almost no one who was first or last. Everyone was giving it their all. When the horses in front of them stopped, the cavalrymen behind them did not know what was happening in front of them. They continued to charge forward. Under the situation where there was no way to retreat, more and more of the Walla cavalry were squeezed into the pit and became a part of the human flesh pile. He Lei Chong was closer to the front and almost fell into the horse trap. When he realized that the situation was not right, he had already stopped his horse. At the same time, he saw a scene that made him angry. His own cavalrymen had squeezed their own cavalrymen into the pit. This kind of loss and death for no reason made him furious. He loudly shouted for everyone to retreat. However, there were too many cavalrymen and the situation was very chaotic. His shouts had long been drowned out by the cries of alarm. "Bastard, bastard, men, blow the horn to retreat, retreat." In a moment of desperation, He Lei called for a guard beside him and had him blow the horn to order the army to retreat. At this time, this action was undoubtedly the right one. Shouts could be drowned out, but the horn would not stop. After hearing the bugle horn for the entire army to retreat, although many of the cavalrymen who rushed over were confused, they still stopped their war horses and began to turn their horses around and retreat. Seeing that the dangerous situation had been stopped, He Lei patted his chest in fear. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, an even more shocking scene occurred. Countless cavalrymen with colorful 5-star flags suddenly appeared in North Desert City. There were so many of them that it was too much for the eyes to take in. Then they were like a dark cloud pressing down from the heavens. Although they were still far away, the sound of arrows piercing through the air could be heard. If both sides were to clash, He would not be afraid of any opponent. He had close to 100,000 cavalrymen. Even if they were to clash head-on, he would not be at a disadvantage. What was worse was that he had just given the order to retreat. Now that his cavalrymen were retreating, it would take some time for him to turn his horse around and charge again. It was obvious that the 5-star cavalrymen would not give them such a chance. He finally realized that everything was just a trap and ambush set up by the 5-star army. However, who was slow to realize, could no longer form a joint force among the cavalrymen to counterattack. At this moment there was only one thing he could do, and that was to retreat. Retreat as far as possible. Only by increasing the distance between both sides could he have the chance to regroup. Chapter 1173. Retreat, all retreat. He had no choice but to give the order to retreat. This time it was not a temporary retreat but a mad retreat. It was a competition of speed. From Mo Bay City, 20,000 Mabe army and 50,000 Mongolian cavalry charged out. The 20,000 Mabe army was naturally a ranking military force. Their strength was almost enough to reach the second rank. As for the 50,000 Mongolian cavalry beside them, their true strength was probably not even a third-rank cavalry. This was because they were made up of young Mongolian men who wanted to kill the enemy but had not gone through any formal training. Their strength was not as good as the enemy. This made Mo Bay Division Commander Xan Honghai and Deputy Commander Na Risong very distressed. Their strength was not as good as the enemy. They could only rely on the walls of Mo Bay City. This was the natural barrier that blocked the Walla cavalry. They had already made preparations to defend the city, but everything changed because of Yang Qindong's telegram. After Xan Honghai and Na Risong saw the contents of the telegram, they were overjoyed and immediately made preparations. Just like when He saw the gates of Mo Bay City open, it was just an illusion. In reality, everyone in the city was under control. The people who appeared in front of them were just normal Mo Bay soldiers in disguise. This was also the reason why He's spies were able to light up the fireworks as soon as they entered the city. It was all because in the controlled North Desert City, there would not be any unfamiliar faces at all. As soon as the scout sent by He entered the city where they could not see, he was caught by Xan Honghai and the others. Under the condition that one of his arms was cut off, he learned of his mission. This caused the smoke to rise, which completely dispelled He's last doubts. The horse trap had been dug long ago. After countless changes, Xan Honghai and Na Risong came to the conclusion that the best time to attack was when the enemy turned around and retreated. In other words, if He had been willing to let the army continue to charge forward, the horse trap would have eventually been filled. At that time, Xan Honghai and the others would have had no choice but to face the Walla army head-on. No one could say for sure whether they would have won or lost. Fortunately, He was a general who loved his soldiers and made a decision that was beneficial to the Mabe army. Because of this he was hunted down. Chase, don't stop, and don't give them any chance to fight back. Xan Honghai's shout reached the ears of all the cavalrymen through the messenger's roar. The pursuit began. They did their best to catch up, not giving He a chance to stop his horse and turn around. No matter how strong a cavalry unit was, if they were not given the opportunity and distance to charge, they would not be able to display their advantage. Under the pursuit, the Walla cavalry could not even display 30% of their usual strength. Occasionally, some cavalrymen who were about to be caught up tried to fight back, but in the end, because there were too few of them, their strength was too weak, and they were drowned by the Mabe and Mongolian cavalrymen and died regretfully. He, who was running among the troops, would occasionally look back. When he saw his soldiers being caught up and killed by the enemy cavalry, he was naturally furious. But he knew very well that there was nothing he could do. He had lost the initiative, and the army was in the process of fleeing. He had no way to fight back. Even if he gave the order or even if he led his troops to charge back, it would be a suicide mission. There was no better way. He could only run, and hope that they could use their better horsemanship to escape the enemy's pursuit. At that time he would gather his main force and charge back. He could already see that the Mabe army and Mongolian troops chasing him were not that strong, and were far inferior to the elite Walla cavalry. If they were to fight head-on, he had at least an 80% chance of winning. One side ran, the other side chased, and the distance of 100 miles was covered in a few hours. With the passage of time, the distance between the two sides continued to widen. It was already difficult for the cavalrymen to catch up to the enemy and be hacked to death by a flurry of blades. He breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he calculated the distance between the two sides. Once he felt that the distance was far enough and he could launch a counterattack, he would be the first to stop his horse. That would be the time for him to teach the enemy a lesson. He was still waiting for an opportunity, but how could he know that the opportunity did not exist for him at all? This was because when they had run around 120 li and were about to open up enough distance to counterattack, they had already arrived at a place 50 li away from the Three Peaks Mountain. Just as they reached the side of the mountain, arrows were shot out, hitting the vanguard of the cavalry. For a moment, the arrows fell like rain, and the horses lost their footing. The sudden attack caught the Walla army off guard. After losing thousands of cavalry, even more cavalry rushed out of the forest, holding bright 5-star flags. The leader was the Far Eastern Army's commander, Qin Bo. When he and his army passed by the Three Peaks Mountain, Qin Bo had already led the 40,000 cavalry to gather here. However, he did not immediately charge out. Instead, he followed Yang Qindong's instructions and waited for the enemy to be defeated so that he could intercept them on the way back. Everything was as Yang Qindong had expected. He had been tricked and was defeated. When they arrived at the foot of the Three Peaks Mountain, it was time for Qin Bo to beat a drowning dog. The sudden appearance of the 40,000 cavalry carrying the 5-star army's flag was like a heavy hammer to the chest, dealing a heavy blow to the Walla cavalry. If it was said that they had the advantage of numbers before, then with the appearance of the Far Eastern Army, the difference in numbers between the two sides had undergone a qualitative change. Out of the 95,000 cavalrymen, they had lost at least 10,000 during their escape. In addition to the surprise attack by the Far East Army, they had lost another 5,000 cavalrymen, leaving them with less than 80,000 soldiers. Naturally, there was a gap between them and the 5-star Corps, which had 110,000 soldiers. Their numbers were inferior, and they had fallen into the enemy's trap. At this moment, he felt like he could not cry out to the heavens. At this moment, any action of fighting would only be sending them to their deaths. The only thing they could do now was to escape, and to continuously escape. Retreat, don't continue fighting, retreat. He's heart was dripping blood as he shouted loudly. His personal guards were constantly blowing the bugle horn to retreat. After losing more than 10,000 riders, the Walla cavalry finally broke out of the encirclement and continued to flee to the east. Chase. The two generals, Xan Honghai and Qin Bo, did not hesitate at all and decisively gave the order to continue the chase. For them, the battle had just begun. With Qin Bo's Far Eastern Army blocking the way, the distance between the two sides was once again shortened. The Walla cavalry was beaten until they were scared witless. When they could finally see the 70,000 Ming army infantry led by Shi Wanshan, there were less than 70,000 cavalry left. From afar, he saw many figures in front of him. He saw the Ming dragon flag raised high, and he also saw the 5,000 Walla cavalry guarding the Ming dragon flag. Haha, the heavens are helping me. He laughed loudly. When he saw the Ming army infantry, he seemed to see a new hope. With the help of these infantry, it was enough to buffer the enemy. That way, he would have the opportunity to reorganize his army and launch a counterattack. He swore that this time he would chase down the 5-star army cavalry and flatten North Desert City. He would even massacre the entire city. He wanted to tell everyone what the consequences of angering the Walla cavalry were. Quick, prepare the bows and arrows. Stop the 5-star army cavalry. He kept increasing the speed of his horse. Although his mount was almost at its limit, he did not feel the slightest bit of heartache. He just wanted to be one step ahead and tell the Ming army to get ready. Then he would launch a full counterattack. As expected of one of the 4 generals chosen by Yes Hen, He's horse was extremely fast. He was at least 30 meters ahead of the messenger and rushed to the front of the Ming army. Following these shouts, countless soldiers of the Ming army raised the bows in their hands. A murderous aura came from them. Facing the scene of tens of thousands of cavalry waiting to be shot, he was not only not afraid but also excited. These were all his allies, his friends. Next, he just needed to wait for the arrows to pass and disrupt the enemy's pursuit formation. Then, it would be time for them to launch a full counterattack. He still had a smile on his face. He did not notice that a general of the Ming army was aiming a strong bow at him. This person was General Ancient River. He had fought with the Walla cavalry countless times. He did not know how many soldiers and trusted generals had died in their hands. This hatred was not something that could be erased by the emperor's decree or by the fact that both sides were allies. Previously he was thinking about the big picture. Even if he wanted to, he could not do anything excessive. But now he was a member of the 5-star army. It was reasonable for him to make a move now. At the same time, it was also a great achievement. The arrow kept moving, aiming at He Lei's chest, who had stopped his horse with a smile on his face. Then his left hand that was holding the arrow's tail loosened. The arrow with the iron tip made a sound as it pierced through the air and flew towards He Lei's chest. Ah! While he was still laughing and imagining the scene of victory in his mind, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then before he could react, he felt a pain in his chest. The arrow's tail was still shaking as it pierced through his chest. This was precisely the arrow shot by Gu He. It hit the target, the unguarded He Lei's chest. He Lei had never thought that this would be the result. He lowered his head and saw the red blood coming out of his chest. He Lei used all his strength to point at the Ming army. With a plop, he fell off his horse. One of the 4 generals that Yeshen valued the most, He Lei closed his eyes and followed in the footsteps of Ting Shu and Mu Tuo. He Lei died like this in front of all the Walla cavalry. This scene shocked them so much that many soldiers could not help but stop. They did not even realize that they were surrounded by the Far Eastern Army, Mabe Army, and Mongolian Army. Chapter 1174. There were also some cavalrymen who quickly recovered from their shock. The first thing they did was to run away. The Ming army had rebelled. They had actually joined forces with the 5-star army to deal with the Walla army. This news must be reported to Yeshen, otherwise they would suffer a great loss. But how could it be so easy to escape at this moment? Not to mention the 70,000 infantrymen of Ming in front of them and the 110,000 5-star army cavalrymen behind them. The 5,000 Walla cavalrymen that were originally in charge of guarding the Ming army had already been taken down by Shan and the others. Now these cavalrymen were replaced by the Ming army. Stop them, don't let a single one of them escape. Also, don't spread the news that Ming and the 5-star army have joined forces. General Shan, who was riding on a horse, took off the Vala cavalry uniform he was using to disguise himself as he shouted loudly. Under Shan's command, such shouts could be heard everywhere on the battlefield. It could be said that everyone knew that Ming had joined forces with the 5-star army. All of this made Qin Bo, Xian Honghai, and the others very anxious. Quick, seal the battlefield, don't let a single enemy escape. If anyone doesn't surrender, kill them. After the military order was given, no matter if it was the Far Eastern Army, the Mabe Army, or the Mongolian cavalrymen, they began to move faster and faster. If any Walla cavalry refused to surrender, they would be killed without mercy. The entire battlefield was suddenly filled with rivers of blood. The already dark green grassland was covered with a layer of bright red. From afar it was very eye-catching and dazzling. Arrows flew, sabers danced, weapons collided, people flew and horses fell. The so-called most precious life was clearly worthless at this moment. One by one, the resisting Walla cavalry were overturned and turned into fertilizer for the grassland, forever buried here. This battle lasted until noon of the second day. The sun hung high in the sky. Only then did the dust settle and the clamor slowly die down. The ground was covered with the corpses of the dead Walla cavalry, as well as the flags that they were once proud of. But at this moment, those flags were already in tatters, as if they were telling the cruelty and difficulty of this battle. There were a total of 100,000 Walla cavalrymen. Nearly 30,000 of them were killed and 70,000 were captured. Unfortunately, hundreds of cavalrymen took advantage of the night to escape. When this result was reported to General Qin Bo, Xian Honghai, and Shan, they couldn't help but look at each other and laughed. Hundreds of cavalrymen ran away. I believe this news will definitely reach Yeshen's ears. Xian Honghai thought of the military order issued by Yang Qindong. At first he felt a little embarrassed. After all, 100,000 Walla cavalry were coming. It was very difficult to defeat them, let alone kill them all and spread the news. But now, it seemed that the mission was completed just like that. Although his side also paid a certain price in this battle, for example, thousands of Mongolian cavalrymen died, and more than 5,000 Ming cavalrymen died. But compared to the results of the battle, there was no doubt that it was a great victory. Definitely. Okay, next, the task of cleaning the battlefield will be handed over to General Shi. Commander XN, we still have to hurry to the beginning city. Qin Bo's face also showed a satisfied smile. But he didn't forget that this was only half of the mission. The most important step in this battle was to meet the beginning city. Well said. Generals, take care. Shi Huanshan also knew that it was impossible for his infantry to maintain the same speed as the cavalrymen. But just as Shi Huanshan's voice fell, a rider came from not far away. The rider was dressed in silver armor. It was Shi Huanshan's deputy, Ancient River. Generals, I also want to go to the battlefield with you to kill the enemy, but please help me. Ancient River, don't make trouble, Shi Huanshan shouted when he saw that Ancient River wanted to interfere. General, I'm not making trouble. This time, we seized a lot of Walla cavalry's horses. I have just mobilized 10,000 soldiers. As long as they are given horses, they are willing to kill the enemy with me. General, how many small shoes did those people put on us before? Now is the time for us to take revenge. Gu, he said with his eyes wide open as if he was unwilling to admit defeat. Seeing that Ancient River was determined, Qinbo looked at him with appreciation. Not bad, you are a tiger general. I think you can do it. Come, bring me a commander's cloak. The bodyguard immediately found a large black cloak, and Qinbo personally handed it to Ancient River. General Ancient, to be able to wear a cloak of this level, you are at least a commander in the 5-star army. I believe you will not disgrace it. Thank you. Ancient River was excited. He stretched out his hands and took it. With a shake of his hands, the cloak spread with the wind and hung on his body. Then he looked at Shi Huanshan with excitement and said, General, do you think I am awe-inspiring? Awe-inspiring. Looking at Ancient River's attire, Shi Huanshan knew that he could not stop him. In addition, Commander Qinbo also expressed his opinion, so he could not stop him. He rode his horse forward and patted Ancient River's shoulder, saying, Be careful. To be able to fight together with the 5-star army is my fortune. General, don't worry, the news of victory will come soon. Ah. Gu, he laughed heartily as he turned around and left. He wanted to tell this good news to his 10,000 cavalry brothers. Qinbo, Xian Honghai, and the others also left very quickly. Looking at the back view of over 100,000 cavalry soldiers leaving, Ning Wenfeng walked to Shi Huanshan's side and said, General, Ancient River is leading the vanguard for us. This is a good thing for us. Of course, I know that he wants to gain more battle merits so that we can have more room for improvement after joining the 5-star army. I also know that ever since we paid 300,000 taels of silver for him, he has been under a lot of psychological pressure. However, there are always casualties in a war. I just hope that he can come back safely. Shi Huanshan sighed and said. Ning Wenfeng nodded heavily. We have been through many trials and tribulations. We have to believe in Brother Ancient River. He will definitely be fine. In the Biming army's barracks at the foot of the Origin City. Under the continuous siege, not only was the Origin City not broken, but it seemed to be more solid. At least the 5-star army in the city resisted more than before. This rather unusual action made many people very surprised, and also had a feeling of puzzlement. Su Dei, like many generals, often showed a thoughtful expression. However, everyone didn't know that his thoughts were different from everyone else. He had been thinking about how to complete the task given by Yang Qindong and how to instigate the relationship between the Biming army and the Walla army. As usual, he walked out of his tent. Unlike some people who like to think about things behind closed doors, Su Dei liked to look around and keep walking to find the answer to the question. Perhaps no one in the entire barracks knew better than him what happened in the grassland of the North Desert 3 days ago. Who would have thought that 100,000 Walla cavalry would be defeated like this? In the end, only a few hundred of them escaped. This would be a big earthquake and completely tear apart the alliance between the Biming army and the Wara army. This was undoubtedly something that the 5-star army hoped to see. Now what he needed to do was to not give the two sides a chance to argue. Thinking and walking, he unconsciously came to the junction between the Biming army and the Wara army. What he saw was the Walla cavalry cooking. The smell of meat was still far away, but it had already drifted over. When the smell entered his nose, Su Dei instinctively twitched his nose. Then an idea came which made the corners of his mouth curl up slightly. And on the same night, the important place where the Biming army stored grain and fodder suddenly caught fire. Although it didn't involve too much grain because of the timely rescue, it still scared the Admiral Marquis Wuxia Shiheng. The grain was sufficient, but it was so laborious to attack the first city. He really didn't dare to imagine how the war would go on without grain and fodder. Therefore, in the general tent, after he severely punished the grain officer 50 times, he ordered people to investigate the matter to see what caused the fire. Shiheng even had a thought. Could the fire be set by the 5-star army? The general was angry, and the efficiency of the people under him was much faster. Just at dawn the next day, the generals sent to investigate reported that someone saw 2 Walla soldiers appear around the grain storage last night. This news made Shiheng's face change greatly. Is the news reliable? Did the 2 people catch them? Reporting back to Marquis, no. You also know that we are allies now. Besides, it was dark at that time and I didn't see their faces clearly. I only recognized them as Walla soldiers from their clothes. The general in charge of the investigation bowed his head and answered. But he would never have thought that the 2 shadows were just Su Dei and his most trusted soldiers in disguise. This was also the simplest way that Su Dei thought of to drive a wedge between the 2 armies. Shiheng didn't know this. What he now learned was that Walla soldiers wanted to set fire to his grain and fodder. What did they want to do? Did they want to fall out with him? Come, immediately invite General Fang and General Xian. This was a matter of great importance, and it was far from what he could decide alone. He now needed to find someone to discuss what to do if this matter was true. After a while, Liaodong General Fang Dingshan and Datong Vice Chief Tsing Guang appeared in the general tent. The 2 of them learned the truth of the matter from Shiheng. No way, we are allies now. Tsing Guang exclaimed after hearing the news. Obviously he never thought of this result. Allies? That's only for now. Not in the past or in the future. Fang Dingshan looked indifferent and didn't seem to be surprised. Chapter 1175. General Fang, what do you mean? Shiheng looked at Fang Dingshan's expression and asked in a puzzled tone, but his expression was natural. It was obvious that he was thinking the same thing. What else? If it weren't for the 5-star army, we would have been mortal enemies with the Walla cavalry. The reason why we joined forces is because the current 5-star army is easier to bully. Once they are eliminated, I'm afraid that our cooperation will end. It's inevitable that we will fall out. After Fang Dingshan said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Shiheng and Tsing Guang. He didn't believe that these 2 people didn't think of this. In fact, Shiheng had already received the decree of the Daizong Emperor. He could join forces with the Wara army, but it was only a limited alliance. He had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. After all, when it came to hatred, the hatred between the 2 sides was far greater than the hatred between Baiming and Yang Qindong. In the past, the Wara army used to harvest grain at the border of the Great Ming grassland. Now that the Great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, they were the initiators. Not long ago, Fang Dingshan led 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to harvest grain in the Wara army's territory, killing their people and stealing their livestock. It was impossible to say that there was no hatred in everyone's heart. Shiheng was naturally very clear about these things. He knew that the hatred between the 2 sides was already irreconcilable, but there was one thing he couldn't figure out. Why did the Wara army choose to attack them at this time? Did they want to join forces to deal with the 5-star army? Shiheng raised the question in his heart and then looked at Fang Dingshan, wanting to see what the other party thought. Marquis, don't look at me. The reason why they did this is probably because they think that we can't take down the first city. Since that's the case, our allied forces will have to disperse sooner or later. If they can cause us some trouble at this time, that's naturally good. By the way, Marquis, please don't forget that the Shajing city and Jingzhou city that we're occupying used to belong to the Tile tribe. Speaking of this matter, Fang Dingshan did not even hesitate. It was clear that he was not optimistic about this alliance. This had a lot to do with Fang Dingshan's personality. He was originally a very arrogant person. In his eyes, only Baiming was orthodox. The 5-star army, the World Wara, and even the Southern Ming dynasty would all submit to Baiming soon. His mission was to conquer them, defeat them, and establish an immortal achievement. With such thoughts in mind, he had long regarded everyone as his enemy. In that case, it would be normal for the enemy to do anything to harm him. There was nothing strange or suspicious about it. If these thoughts were known by Su Dei, he would be very happy. This proved that his plan to sow discord had succeeded. You're right. It seems that we have to be careful of them. By the way, General Tsin, how confident are you in taking down the first city? Shiheng nodded in agreement. What Fang Dingshan said was roughly the same as what he thought. However, there was one difference. In his eyes, the 5-star army was a bigger enemy. No matter how strong the World Wara was, they were only able to move freely on the grassland. In contrast, Bugnam of Gojoseon had the ability to penetrate the hinterland of Baiming. This was what he needed to guard against the most. When he thought of Bugnam of Gojoseon, it reminded him of the first city. He wanted to know how confident he was in taking down the first city. It should be soon. This time, Tsingguang was not as confident as before. It was not because of anything else. It was because the difficulty of attacking the city had increased over the past few days. The 5-star army that was guarding the city seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They began to regain their vitality and were not as easy to deal with as they were in the beginning. However, with the advantage of besieging the city, he firmly believed that the other party would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, it was certain that they would be able to take down the city, provided that they had enough time. Then let's speed up. Shiheng did not intend to urge Tsingguang. These days the momentum of the siege was still very fierce. As the commander, he knew very well in his heart. Of course, he did not know that there was not much time left for him. By the way, General Fang, what do you think we should do next against the World Wara? Shiheng did not forget the purpose of asking the two of them to discuss this matter. What else can we do? We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. In the future, we will increase the number of soldiers guarding the provisions. In addition, I will also send people to keep an eye on them. Fang Dingshan said with a relaxed expression. If the other party still had 150,000 cavalrymen, he would be nervous. But now, there were only 50,000 of them, which was even less than him. He was really not afraid. This was also because the emperor did not give an order. Otherwise, he would have dared to kill these people. Fang Dingshan said it so casually that Shiheng also breathed a sigh of relief. This was the advantage of having strong soldiers. When dealing with things, they would have a lot more confidence. Well, then we have to pay attention to the World Wara's every move at all times. Of course, the main thing is to attack the city. As long as we take down the first city, even if they have other ideas, they will have to hold back. When we deal with the 5-star army, it will be time to go back and deal with them. General Tsun, please pay attention to this point. After going around in circles, they finally returned to the problem of how to take down the first city. Yes, I will do my best. But now we are a little short of troops. Can we see if we can transfer some from the rear? Tsingguang asked tentatively. These days, although the 5-star army that was guarding the city was under great pressure, they also suffered a lot of losses. The number of wounded had exceeded 30,000, and the other soldiers were also exhausted. If they could get a fresh army to join them now, then they would have a greater chance of taking down the city. Shiheng was the military commander personally appointed by the emperor. He was in charge of all the military affairs at the front line. Only he had the final say on things like transferring troops. After hearing Tsingguang's request, he asked very seriously, General Tsun, how many more troops do you need? Can you guarantee that you can take down the first city? Hearing that there was hope, Tsingguang said with some excitement, there is no problem in taking down the first city. I can feel that the enemy's strength has been greatly reduced. Now, it is just a little bit away. If Marquis can give me an additional 100,000 troops, then I am confident that I can take down the city within 5 days. If it is not possible, I am willing to offer my head. This was equivalent to giving a military order. If there were really 100,000 fresh troops, they could attack from the 4 city gates regardless of day or night. It was really possible to take down the city in 5 days. So confident? That's good. Marquis will immediately give the order to transfer troops. Shiheng was also very excited when he heard this. Although the transfer of 100,000 infantrymen was not part of the plan, it would be a great achievement if they could take down the first city. Not only would he be able to report to the emperor, but he would also be able to obtain a great achievement. Thank you, Houyi. Hearing that the matter was approved, Tsingguang was also very excited. The meeting ended. Shiheng found his messenger and took out the Tiger Troop talisman. He asked them to go to Tulu City, Sambulachuan City, Shajing City, and Jingzhou City to transfer troops. Tulu City was the fortress of the rear base of the Ming army. There were originally 50,000 soldiers there. They were responsible for guarding the provisions, and if there were any changes they would be reinforcements. When Shiheng gave the order, 40,000 of the 50,000 soldiers were transferred. Sambulachuan City had fewer soldiers. There were only 30,000 soldiers guarding the city. Among them, there were 10,000 wounded soldiers who had retreated from the front line. Shiheng gave the order, and 20,000 healthy soldiers were transferred away, leaving only 10,000 injured soldiers behind. If there were no external forces, there wouldn't be any problems. There were 60,000 soldiers out of 100,000. The last 40,000 soldiers could only be sent to Shajing City and Jingzhou City. This made it difficult for Rong Xiao, who was in charge here. As a businessman, he knew that if he wanted to expand his business, he could not do without his own people in the imperial court. How could he be considered one of his own people? Of course, it was not as good as being an official himself. Once he became a pillar of the country, who would dare to cause trouble for him in the future? After a discussion with the Rong family, Rong Xiao finally gave Shiheng 200,000 taels of silver. In addition to his contribution in successfully instigating the rebellion of the two cities, he was promoted to general of the two cities. He became Shiheng's favorite person. When Shiheng gave the order, Rong Xiao knew that his chance to perform had come. He called Su Yuan over and said with a troubled expression, "The opportunity is here. However, when we negotiated with the spirit-severing army, we said that they wouldn't go against the five-star army. What do you think we should do?" This. Su Yuanjiang furrowed his brows. After following Shabi for such a long time, he knew the general's temper. He was a man of his word. Based on how much Yang Qindong valued him, even without the agreement, Yang Qindong probably wouldn't send troops out due to guilt, let alone with the agreement in hand. However, Su Yuan knew that Rong Xiao didn't call him over to see him shake his head. Rong Xiao wanted him to come up with a plan. Well, the Han people have a saying, times are different now. The situation is different, so the original agreement will have to be changed. What's more, he's been drinking wine every day, and with Wu Xiaoyi's death, the other three teachers have a lot of opinions about him. I think it's better to bypass him and talk to the teachers directly. Is that okay? Rong Xiao's eyes lit up when he heard that. Why not? How about this? I will talk to the three teachers first. However, I would like to ask Lord Rong to remove the people who are monitoring the three division masters, as well as those who are responsible for sowing discord. Since we are here to talk, we must show our sincerity. Su Yuan thought for a moment and proposed his idea. That's not a problem. Rong Xiao agreed. He had no other choice. Although the method of sowing discord had some effect now, as long as he was given time, he was confident that he could take over the military power of the three division commanders. Then he could find a reason to arrest them. However, with Shiheng's order and a short 3 days, he did not have the patience to wait for the next batch of soldiers. Chapter 1176. Su Yuan left Rong Xiao's place and went straight to the residence of Kang Ji, the commander of the new Second Army's 1st Cavalry Division in Shajing City. In the Kang residence, Kang Ji was very surprised when he found out that Su Yuan was outside the residence and wanted to see him. He couldn't figure out why the other party wanted to see him at this time. Well, since he's here, I'll invite him in. Kang Ji and Su Yuan sat opposite each other in the living room of the residence. The other bodyguards were all removed from the living room. This was Su Yuan's request. After all, he was here to ask for help. Not only would he lose face if he said some soft words in front of so many people, he was also afraid that he would be put on the spot. Without anyone else around, Su Yuan didn't care about his reputation and directly made his request. Mr. Kang, I'm sorry for offending you before. It wasn't my idea to send people to monitor your residence. And those people who tried to sow discord in the division weren't sent by me either. I've already protested to Rong Xiao about this matter. He has already promised that these people will all be recalled. I hope that this matter won't affect our friendship. Kang Ji was shocked that Su Yuan was so humble right from the start. It wasn't a big deal to monitor his own people, and he didn't intend to do anything when the time wasn't right. But those people who tried to sow discord really gave him a headache. They spread unfavorable words about him everywhere in the division. At first it was fine. With his usual character, no one believed those words. But some things were afraid of being repeated. If he said too much, it was inevitable that people would believe him. Over time, there were people in the division who started to have ulterior motives. It was just that they didn't have enough evidence. In addition, this matter was instigated by Rong Xiao. Even if he wanted to make a move, he didn't have the right opportunity. Originally, he thought that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to regain the command power when he really needed to use the army one day. He didn't expect that Su Yuan would solve all these problems and worries. This was an unexpected surprise. Of course, since he did such a big thing for him, he must have a favor to ask of him. Kang Ji didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. So although he was happy, he pretended to be calm and said, "Mr. Su, we're not outsiders. Just tell me, what price do you need me to pay?" "Mr. Kang, you're really straightforward. It's like this. The military operation to attack the first city is going smoothly, and it looks like we will be able to take it in a few days. Considering the problem of maintaining the safety of that place in the future, Admiral Shiheng ordered our new Second Army to send 20,000 soldiers to assist. The mission given was to send 40,000 soldiers. Rong Xiao had 20,000 soldiers. Now that there were only 20,000 soldiers left, he had to rely on the new Second Army. With the current strength of the new Second Army, there were a total of 4 divisions. If each division could send 5,000 soldiers, then the number would be enough. When he heard that the beginning city would be conquered in a few days, Kangji's heart started to beat more frequently and faster. If the beginning city was really conquered, then when would he be able to return to the 5-star army? Fortunately, Su Yuan's next words made Kangji heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he also saw the other party's real intention. Ming did not have enough soldiers at the front line. They must have fallen into a difficult situation when attacking the beginning city. Otherwise, they would not have come to beg him. After knowing the other party's purpose, Kangji felt relieved and started to pick up his gun. Mr. Su, I'm sure you still remember the agreement that the military commander signed with you. The first clause is that we can't be enemies with the 5-star army anymore. We were forced to surrender. We've already let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. How can we go against our conscience and be enemies with them? We really can't do such a thing. Su Yuan revealed an expression that said, as expected. He knew that the other party would say this. Then he smiled and said, Mr. Kong, you've misunderstood. Didn't I say just now? These troops are not going to fight with the 5-star army. They are only responsible for the defense of the beginning city in the future. You also know that even if there is no 5-star army on the grassland, there is still the Walla cavalry and the Mongolian cavalry from various tribes. They are not so easy to deal with. The beginning city is such a big city in front of us. If we don't have enough troops to defend it, we will face the danger of losing it at any time. The reason given by Su Yuan was very suitable. Kangji could not find a reason to refute it. However, their division only had more than 8,000 people. If 5,000 people were transferred away all of a sudden, their strength would be reduced by more than half. This was not what he wanted to see. It was certainly a good thing to be able to remove the people who were monitoring him and spreading rumors in the army. However, how to agree to the other party's request without being heartbroken was what Kangji needed to consider. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at Su Yuan and asked anxiously, Mr. Kong, say something. Sir Rong Xiao is still waiting for the news. Well, it's really impossible to transfer 5,000 people from a division. Kangji had a rough idea in his mind in a short period of time. He finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, Su Yuan was immediately unhappy. Mr. Kong, what do you mean? I just said that we are not going to be enemies with the 5-star army. Wait, Mr. Su, wait for me to finish. You just said that these troops are not rushing to the beginning city to be enemies with the 5-star army. They are responsible for defending the city after taking it down. If that's the case, what do you think about this? I'll transfer 2,000 people from the division to you. Then you'll recruit 3,000 able-bodied men from the city as soldiers. In this way, won't you make up 5,000 people? The advantage of doing this is that it won't affect the combat ability of our new Second Army. It can also help you complete the mission. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Besides, it's just a mission to defend the city. It's not difficult. Even if they haven't undergone any training, they can still do it well. What do you think? Kangji came up with a way to get the best of both worlds. He needed to ensure the combat ability of a division. The organization could be incomplete, but they could be pulled and fought when there was a mission. Therefore, he had no choice but to come up with this plan. Originally, Su Yuan wanted to say something. However, when he heard this method, his attitude became a little hesitant. Since he did not reject it immediately, there was a way. Kangji added fuel to the fire and said, Mr. Su, why does Ming value us so much? Isn't it because our army has a certain level of combat ability? If we don't have this characteristic, who will still value us? By that time, it'll be time to get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If that's the case, we won't have a good ending. I'm sure Mr. Su won't have a good time either. Factions are the most important thing in the army. A good man has 3 factions. Kangji said these words from Su Yuan's perspective. This made Su Yuan, who was originally hesitant, finally make up his mind. Not bad. Mr. Kong, you're indeed a talented general with both wisdom and courage. You're right. How about this? I'll go talk to Mr. Rong Xiao now. Oh, by the way, about the 2,000 people that the 1st Cavalry Division will send out, please make early preparations. Sure. I'll make the arrangements now. Kangji thought about how some people in the division were dissatisfied with him. Some of them were simply spreading rumors. He didn't know how to deal with these people. Now that there was an opportunity, it would be good to get rid of them so that he could better control the troops. Su Yuan left in a hurry. He did not know how he told Rong Xiao, but the matter was settled. Then the recruitment of soldiers in the two cities began. They were not working for the 5-star army, which was for the people. The people were not very enthusiastic about joining the army. In the end, there was no other way. The recruitment became a recruitment of able-bodied men. Who asked Shi Heng to be so anxious? Rong Xiao, who wanted to show off, had to do things well. Not only that, he also decided to personally send 40,000 troops to Beginning City to curry favor with Shi Heng. Under Beginning City, the siege was still ongoing. Since the military order was made in front of Shi Heng and Fang Dingshan, under the command of Guang, the attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Several times their soldiers rushed up the city tower. Although they were eventually suppressed, at least they saw the dawn of victory. The siege was very lively. The Wara war camp under the city was unusually quiet. This kind of siege warfare was not suitable for cavalry. They had been under the city for a long time, and some of the cavalry were even lazy. But all of this changed with the return of a few Wala cavalry. They were the Wala warriors who followed General He Lei to the battle. They were lucky enough to escape. Naturally, they had to return to the camp and report everything they saw and experienced to their leader. In fact, they were not the only ones who returned. Not far from the camp, there were hundreds of cavalry waiting there. Everyone heard Shi Wanshan's shout and knew that Bai Ming had joined forces with the 5-star army. They were worried that once they returned, they would alert the enemy, so they sent a few representatives back to the camp. In the leader's tent, Yes Hen received these deserters. After learning that He Lei died in battle and only a few hundred of the cavalry escaped, he was so angry that he flipped the desk in front of him and said angrily, "You said that the reason why we lost was because the Bai Ming army stabbed us in the back, right?" "Yes, leader. We saw it with our own eyes and experienced it personally. Otherwise, with our fast horses, no matter how many enemies there are, they can't stop us." Several soldiers who escaped knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Good. What a good Bai Ming army. I trusted them so much, but they dared to play tricks behind our backs. I'm going to find Shi Heng and ask him for an explanation. Yes Hen could not suppress his anger and was about to leave the tent. "You can't." A figure blocked his way and then that person knelt on the ground. "Leader, you can't do that. Bai Ming and the 5-star army have joined forces. If we go to them now, not only will it not have the slightest effect, but it will also alert them. If we don't do it well, they will do harm to our leader." The person who spoke was the deputy general that Yes Hen had just promoted, Chao Lu. In Mongolian, it meant stone. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.